I was on a road trip by myself heading through the Midwest when I passed through an abandoned town, or a ghost town. I've always wanted to explore abandoned places, but I've never had the time or just didn't want to get in trouble with the police. I decided to pull off into the parking lot of an old gas station. I turned my truck off and hopped out. I started looking around at the pumps. They were rusty and the glass covering the meter was foggy. I took a picture of one of the pumps and sent it to my friend who usually goes exploring things. He didn't read it right away, so I just went inside the gas station. Luckily enough for me, someone already broke the door down, so I could easily get inside. I was fascinated with how well preserved the inside looked. There were some old snacks still on the shelves, drinks in the non-running fridges, and the cash register was still up at the front. The drawer was open, so someone either stole the money or they got it when the store closed. I started to examine the bags of chips and took a guess that this town was abandoned in the mid-90s. I looked around for a few more minutes, then left. I started walking over to another building when I turned back around. I didn't want to leave my truck where it could easily be stolen, so I drove it over to the next building I was going to explore. This building looked like an apartment building. It was white, and the windows were all boarded up. I searched around for an entrance, but didn't find one. I tried the doors, and luckily the back door was unlocked. The building smelled horrible, and I knew people were living in here. My friend texted back and asked, "Are you finally exploring?" I replied with, "Yes, I finally am." He called me, and I went back outside to take the call.
"Where are you exploring?"
he asked. Just some ghost town," I replied.
"Who's with you?"
"Just me and my trusty Chevy C1500.
"Of course. You really don't need to explore alone. You know that, right?"
"I have my gun in the truck. I'll be fine."
"Keep it on you in case someone tries to jump you."
"Okay, it's in my waistband of my jeans."
"Good. Make sure you can get it out quickly just in case. And make sure you're fully loaded."
"I am. I'm keeping the safety on, though."
"Okay. Just be safe and don't kill yourself."
"I'll try not to. See you later."
"See ya."
I hung up the phone and put it back in my pocket. The sun was beginning to set, but I couldn't fight the urge to explore just a few more buildings. I went back inside the apartment building and was met with the horrible smell again. It smelled like old food and dead things. I was hoping it wasn't a human body. It was just a large amount of dead mice, but it could be anything. The first floor was pretty much stripped out except for a few tables or homeless beds. I pulled my gun out and kept it low and headed up to the second floor. I didn't see anything in the hallway, but there was a curtain covering one of the rooms. I wasn't stupid enough to look inside. The other room was open, so I went inside. I turned my safety off and started looking around. Inside, there was a cheap-looking bed, a desk, a TV stand with an old box TV, a kitchen, and a filthy-looking couch. The TV was busted, and the bed covers were all messed up. I walked over to the kitchen and started looking through all the cabinets. There was eerily preserved everyday life things such as sugar, cereal boxes, spices, pots and pans, dishes, and other kitchen things. I started thinking about all the memories that could have been made here, and who lived here. The thoughts overwhelmed me, but they quickly cleared when I started hearing footsteps in that room with the doorway covered. I quietly hid behind the bar in the kitchen. I had my gun in my hand in case this person or thing wasn't friendly. A man came out from behind the curtain. He was wearing a dirty blue hoodie and some stained jeans. His face was covered, and he had his hood up. The mysterious man walked down the hallway and outside. I watched out the window where my truck was visible. He started eyeing my truck. I slowly made my way downstairs, but by the time I got down there, the man was already down the street. I assumed he was going to buy drugs or go to the bathroom, so I left the building. I got in my truck and started it up. It's not a quiet truck, so the guy was probably going to keep his eye on me if he sees me driving around. It was really starting to get dark, so I decided 2 more buildings. I drove over to the neighborhood part of the town and picked the biggest house to explore. I could hear some commotion in a small house down the street, so I kept the safety on my gun off. I went around back and discovered some cars under a little carport. One was a boring old Toyota Camry, and there was one under a cover. I pulled the blue tarp off the top, and it was a 1977 Chevy Camaro. I went around to the front of it and saw the Z28 badge. The big house and the Z28? These people must have been loaded. But I was still confused on the fact why they would just leave everything here, like this beautiful car. I'm a car guy, so I spent about 20 minutes looking at it. I finally made my way back to the house. I went inside, and this house looked untouched. The house was clean, except for a little broken glass, and the furniture looked clean, but very dusty, as expected. They had nice recliners, a nice TV for the era, and they had fine china in the kitchen cabinets. These people were definitely the loaded people in town. I wanted to find out some more history, but there was no one to ask. I just kept looking around the house. I saw the door to a basement and peeked inside. Looked like a typical basement. Washing machine, dryer, furnace, water heater, so I didn't bother going down there. I looked around in the few other rooms on the first floor, but didn't find anything super cool. I went upstairs to the top floor and saw some odd dolls pinned to the wall. Weird. I didn't have my gun in my hand since this house didn't really feel all dangerous. I walked over to a door and opened it up. This room caught my attention. It had loads of model cars still in the box, just on display. I assumed this guy was a car guy, just like me. I look at most of the models that I took a liking in, fighting the urge to load all of them up in the bed of my truck and drive away with them. I moved on to the next room. The next room was a bedroom. Looked like a boy's bedroom. It was messy with clothes and toys all over the floor. There was a paper on the desk in the corner. I picked it up. It had a date on it. The date said 06/23/97. So this paper is from June 23rd, 1997. The paper read, "The government is forcing us to leave the town. There was a problem with the lab at the hospital, and now everyone has to leave with just the bare essentials. Mom and Dad are making us take the station wagon, even though I want to take the Camaro. Anyways, I wrote this paper because I was bored. And if anyone finds this, Tamagotchis are the best. From Evan." The paper seemed very strange to me. What happened in that lab? Was a creature created? Was something on the loose? Why couldn't people take everything? Why didn't this kid's parents take the Camaro? So many thoughts. I put the paper back on the table since it's the only thing that tells the history on this town so far. I took a picture of it and posted it on Instagram. I also started thinking about the Tamagotchi part. I remember mine. I never took care of it. I never took care of anything. My mom told me I should start caring for my Tamagotchi more. I asked why. She replied with, "Because if you don't take care of things, they won't last." Even something as simple as that changed my whole outlook on things. The owner of this house must have known that lesson. I looked around the room a little bit more and then headed outside. I could hear some strange noises, like screaming. I got in my truck and put the gun on the seat next to me. I cranked my window down and slowly drove through the streets. There was one street light in the distance. It was flickering. There was someone standing under it, so I rolled my window up in case it tries to jump inside. I slowly pulled up next to it. It was the homeless guy from earlier. I couldn't see his face earlier since he had something covering it and his hood was up, but now I could see it. It scared me. His face was half eaten away by who knows what. He was just standing there looking down the road I just drove. I was examining him closer when he snapped his head right at my truck. It scared the crap out of me. I asked if he was all right through the window. No response. I asked again. No response again. I drove away from him, shivering a little bit. I turned around and saw him still looking at me. His body was facing down the road, but his head was turned all the way around. I turned the corner up here and started to make my way towards Main Street. I saw another person standing in the yard of another abandoned house. The same thing was wrong with their face. For now, they seemed peaceful, but I wasn't going to say that they were. I found Main Street, and there were more people or things lining the street on each side. There were 4 on each side of the street just staring at me. A few of them were bloody, and they were smiling with the scariest smile I'd ever seen. I put the pieces together. These were the people affected by the hospital lab problem. I guaranteed that's what the problem was, and that's why everyone had to leave. I drove on the street in between them, and their gaze followed my truck. Only their heads moved. Their bodies stayed locked in one direction. I took a picture of them. I started slowly driving off. That's when they started following me. They walked towards me and stopped when they were about 10 feet away from my truck. I drove forward. They followed. I backed up. They backed up. It was super weird. It felt like they were robots programmed to always stay within 10 feet. I drove into the gas station lot, and sure enough, there they were. I imagined that they were going to follow me home, so I had no choice. I rammed into them with the bed of my truck. They fell and didn't get up. I looked over and one was standing extremely close to my window. I hit that one too. More started coming out of the buildings and started approaching my truck. I did a burnout and got out of the town before something could happen. I tried navigating an abandoned town in the dark with these things following me. My gas tank was running low. I drove out the way I came in and got onto the highway. I could see the silhouettes of them in my rearview mirror. It was an eerie sight. I decided I didn't want to continue my road trip after that encounter, so I started to make my way home. I stopped at a gas station, filled up, and headed back to my home state. I swear, I just wanted to pick up a hobby. After spending 8-hour shifts in a boring office, I needed something, anything, to break the monotony. I wasn't a gym guy, but one night while driving home, I passed by a small 24-hour fitness center tucked between a laundromat and a small Vietnamese cafe. It wasn't fancy. The sign was barely lit, the glass doors were tainted by glue marks from old posters, and the inside smelled like stale sweat. But it was cheap, absurdly cheap. No contracts, no hidden fees. It felt like a good deal, so I signed up on the spot. That night, I went there at 10 p.m. after a quick drink with my friends. The only other person there was a man on the treadmill, jogging at a steady rhythm while watching a movie on his phone. The receptionist barely glanced at me as he gave me the locker key. I changed into my gym clothes and started lifting 5 kilograms. Well, I wasn't strong, but it felt good to do something different. Then, halfway through my set, something caught my eye. A shoe. It was lying near the entrance to the locker room. I looked around. The treadmill guy was still running, both shoes intact. The receptionist was at the front desk. I turned back. The shoe was gone. I rubbed my eyes. Maybe I was imagining things. The long shifts at work had left me exhausted, and I had barely eaten all day. I pushed through the rest of my workout and headed to the locker room to grab my things, and that's when it happened. At first, it was just a sound, the faint shuffle of fabric, like someone moving inside a locker. I hesitated. "Hey, man," I called out, trying to sound casual, laughing a little. "You good?" No response. I took a few steps forward. Suddenly, I smelled something damp and metallic. I reached for my locker, but as I did, I caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of the mirror. A figure crouched by the farthest locker, its back hunched, head tilted slightly. I froze. The only other person working out in the gym was the guy on the treadmill. I knew it. I turned my head slowly. The treadmill guy was still running, still facing his phone attached to the holder, still moving at the exact same unbroken rhythm. So who the hell was in the locker room with me? I slammed my locker shut and walked, not ran, to the exit. As I stepped into the gym floor, I made the mistake of looking back. The locker room door stood slightly ajar, and from the darkness, a pair of eyes peered out. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my bag, walked straight past the receptionist, and into the night. I canceled my membership the next morning. The receptionist just smiled wryly and let me go, as if it wasn't a big deal. The whole thing bugged me. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe I was just tired. Or maybe it was a homeless guy who got the owner's permission to sleep for the night. It was a cheap gym after all, not a fancy fitness center with stuff worth stealing. That's what I told myself, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had seen something I wasn't supposed to. That night, I looked up the gym's name online, found it, and I went straight to the reviews where there were like 100 of them. Most of the reviews were normal, praising the student-friendly membership fee and the 24-hour service. They offer no personal trainers, but if you come during lunchtime, this gym is packed with the other blokes that are happy to assist you. I'm an introvert and I love redacted gym. It feels like a private gym after 9 p.m. Mostly it was only me and that one runner guy on the treadmill. LOL. If you don't mind the rusty dumbbells, this place could turn you into Mr. Olympia for just a few bucks per month. I also found a number of one-star reviews, mostly complained about broken machines and the smell. Classic. Then, further deep down, almost obscured by other one-star reviews, I found something strange. A few mentioned feeling watched in the locker room. Something is off about this place. The first time I came here, I thought I saw someone inside the lockers. I turned around, and they were gone. Canceled my membership immediately. Another. I swear I felt someone standing behind me when I worked out. But when I turned around, there was never anyone there. Why would they build a gym on a haunted place? I felt a chill run down my spine. I stopped scrolling and I closed my laptop shut. But curiosity got the better of me, so I decided to search more about the location. After a moment of scrolling, I found a news article. A man found dead in abandoned building. Case remains unsolved. I clicked on it, my pulse quickening. The article was brief. The victim had been missing for weeks before his body was discovered in an abandoned structure on the outskirts of the city. The police found no suspects, no murder weapon. The case went cold. Something gnawed at me. The article didn't specify where the abandoned building was, but something about the wording, recently abandoned structure, made me pause. A stupid, paranoid thought wormed into my head. I opened Google Maps and searched the gym's address. The current view showed the building as it was now. Just a regular rundown gym I had visited the previous day. Then I clicked on the historical images. I traced it back a year. Same gym. 3 years. Same gym, but in a better condition. The facade was immaculate. The glass doors were much cleaner. 5 years. The gym was not there. Instead, I saw a different building. An empty, decaying structure covered in graffiti, windows shattered, its front entrance blocked off with police tape. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. The place where the man had been murdered was the exact same spot where the gym stood now. And then I saw it, in the old street view image from a broken window on the second floor of the abandoned building. A pair of piercing eyes stared back at me, the same eyes I had seen peering from the locker room that night. I don't know what I saw in the locker room that night, and I don't know who or what was hiding inside those lockers. But I do know one thing: I'll never step foot in a random gym again. I heard it again last night. They are calling out to me. No one understands it because it's meant for me. I think I will join them. I liked my uncle. He wasn't that much older than me, and he always made me feel included whenever we were together. He bought me my first gaming console and taught me how to play Dungeons and Dragons. I remember being told by my mother that he was gone. She wouldn't talk to me about it, wouldn't even let me ask. I didn't hear anything more about it until I was 20 and received a knock at my door from his lawyer. Apparently, he had left detailed notes about his inheritance, and he had finally been ruled dead after all this time. I remember thinking the lawyer looked strange, but every time I think about him, I can't put my finger on what threw me off. He was wearing a nice black suit, and he looked old, but that was it. He had no other notable features. I remember expecting a few knickknacks and games, maybe, so I was surprised when the only thing the old man handed me was a small, ancient-looking radio. It was a handheld thing with a flat profile, a long metal antenna, and some much-abused dials. I remember it being cold to the touch as I took it from the lawyer. Something like relief crossed his face. I thought it was some kind of joke at first, like my uncle had orchestrated this whole thing just so he could disappear to another country, and this was just the cherry on top. I called my mom immediately, and apparently the lawyer had visited her too with her portion of the inheritance. When I told her about the radio, she seemed equally confused. She had just gotten some money and his old beat-up car. That evening, I sat down to watch a movie. Nothing special, just some comedy schlock. About halfway through it, I started to hear a sputtering fritzing underneath the sound emanating from my TV. At first I thought it had started raining hard, and I was hearing the droplets of water dash themselves against my windows, but as I glanced to my left, I saw the sky was clear. I tried to ignore it. It was probably just my shitty TV acting up, and I didn't want to find out that I needed to buy another one. But as the movie went on, the quality of the noise changed. It was static. That much was clear now. But it shifted in pitch and tenor every few moments. I used to have bad migraines as a kid, and the only way I can describe that noise is that it sounded like how migraines feel, agonizing and fundamentally wrong in some way. I decided to turn off the movie and head to bed early, but when I shut the TV off, I realized the sound wasn't coming from it. It was coming from an object I had placed on the console beneath it. The old radio my uncle owned. It must have turned on by accident when I set it down. I didn't even think it would work, to be honest, but hearing that strange noise coming from it, I decided I'd play around a bit. I walked into my room and sat down on my bed, fiddling with the dials on the ancient piece of technology. The noise shifted and changed like an animal being prodded until I could finally make out some noise. It was a local radio station hosting a dreary-sounding quiz. Satisfied with my progress, I got ready for bed and headed to sleep. I don't remember what I dreamed of that night, but I recall waking up to a tear-stained pillowcase and feeling the smooth afterglow of a shot of adrenaline. The radio was still playing, I realized, but it had gone back to that strange warbling noise. In the weeks that followed, the thing became just another object in my increasingly cluttered apartment. I talked to my coworker and best friend Andrew about it at the time because he's a big analog tech nerd, and he said that my uncle might have willed it away to me because it's a rare model that was discontinued pretty soon after its release. I idly thought about selling the thing, but it felt like a slap in the face to the memory of my uncle. It slipped from my mind entirely by the time it intruded on my life once more. I was disturbed awake by the static coming from the radio. I was reaching over to take the batteries out when I heard something in the cacophony of noise. It was a voice. Faint, barely even a whisper at first, but I could certainly hear a voice. My blood ran cold. It was probably just a snippet of a broadcast it was picking up, but as the voice clarified in the static, I knew that to be false.
Work harder than him. You know it.
It was Andrew's voice, unmistakably. My hand hovered over the radio, stopped in its tracks.
He's been with the company for years.
The voice was that of an older man, my boss. I couldn't wrap my head around what was happening. Was this some kind of prank? I checked my watch and it was 3 in the morning. My boss was not the man to pull this kind of joke.
And he does fuck all for it. You know I'm a better fit for this position. You've seen the stats.
I could feel my stomach drop. I knew when this conversation took place. I had walked in on them talking that day, and they had seemed a bit awkward. But that would be impossible. Was someone recording them? Why would they play this for me? Beyond the confusion and terror, I could feel the embers of rage begin to smolder within me. Everyone knew I was due the promotion after my manager quit. Was he trying to weasel his way in? The static cut out abruptly, and I grabbed it to start fiddling with the dials to get it back. I heard nothing but static. For the next few days, I saw Andrew talking with our boss more and more. He tried to start conversations with me, but I knew his game, how he was only being nice to me because he pitied me. I wouldn't fall for it. I could hardly get anything done. All I could think about was the radio and Andrew. I spent all week trying to find the frequency on the radio that led to it dispensing its secrets, but it just wouldn't work. On Friday, my mom called me.
Hey, sweetie.
It was a relief to hear her voice. I didn't realize how stressed I was, but the week had really taken a toll on me. Hey, Mom.
Your friend Andrew called. He said he was worried about you, that you were acting strange in work.
My blood all but boiled. He was talking to my mom now? I stopped myself. Taking a moment to breathe, I reeled in my thoughts. All of this caused by a radio message I could have dreamt up? Yeah, it's just been a really rough week, I responded, holding my head in my hands, feeling the weight of exhaustion pulling me to places I didn't want to be.
Well, sweetie, if there's anything you need to talk about, just let me know.
Thanks, Mom. Love you.
Love you too. Take care of yourself.
She hung up. I took a moment to center myself after the call. I resolved to go to sleep early and apologize to Andrew in the morning. I opened my eyes and I was already sitting up in bed. The pitch black of my room was only punctuated by the stars that speckled my window. There were so many stars out that night, with no moon to hide them from me.
He's never been with it, Tom.
It was my mother's voice coming from the radio this time. I pressed my hand to it. I could almost feel the static through the hard, cold metal, like something was trying to reach out to me.
You need to stop coddling the boy. He's an adult now.
My dad's voice was rough.
I just don't want him to end up like my brother.
What embers of rage ignited within me. I knew this wasn't a dream. I could feel just how real everything was. I could taste the blood in my mouth from biting my cheek, smell a strange ferrous rust odor that seemed to waft from the radio. And most of all, I could hear the static in my ears, like a choir of angels. I stayed awake that night, waiting until I knew my mother would be awake. I called her, and she answered quickly.
What's wrong, Dennis?
She answered with what I knew to be faux sincerity. Never been with it? End up like your brother? I didn't think you'd sink that low, Mom. I bit back with as much venom as I could muster.
What are you talking about?
The lines started to break up a bit, but I soldiered on. I know what you were saying to Dad. I know what you really think. Tears of rage were streaming down my face by this point.
I don't know what you were talking about.
Static replaced her speech, a comfortable, keening static, one that promised to wash away all of the painful details in my life. I hung up with the assurance that at least someone had my back. I took the radio and put it in my bag as I left my apartment. The assurance, the weight of the device provided, carried me through the hall, down the stairs, and to my car. I nearly dropped my keys several times before I could start my car. I didn't even realize I was trembling. Andrew's home was a small terraced house near the center of town. This early in the morning, traffic was almost non-existent, so getting there was easy. All of my car's radio channels produced static. I parked along the footpath and hopped over the small fence leading to his house. I was going to get the truth out of him, no matter what. I knocked on the green wooden door so furiously, the hinges started to shake. When he opened the door bleary-eyed and frightened, I started to lay into him, shouting at him about how he was a horrible friend, how he ruined my life, how I would never forgive him for what he did. The look of confusion on his face made me want to put my fist straight through it. When he spoke, his mouth blurred and distorted. His face started to fritz and fill with TV static as his words turned to the sweet chords of my angel's song. The radio was protecting me from his lies. I knew what I needed to do now. It was all so clear. Without another word, I turned and left in my car. When I got home, it was nighttime. I didn't even question it. It seemed right. When I entered my home, I could see countless stars piercing through the night, shifting and twinkling against the black. Pixels of white and black dancing in an endless waltz across the cosmos, all for me. Even as I write this, the radio is calling for me. They want me to join them. No one else in my life has ever wanted me so wholly. I know what happened to my uncle now, and I think I will follow him. It began with the bus ride. Late at night, headphones in, tears trailing silently down my face. The world outside the rain-slicked window was a blur, much like my thoughts. My boyfriend had left me that evening, the love of my life, gone. The ache in my chest was sharp, unrelenting. The bus's faint rumble was the only sound accompanying my quiet sorrow. When the bus hissed to a stop, I stepped off into the night. The station was eerily still. A couple of figures stood at the far end, unmoving, their faces turned away. Something about them felt wrong. They were too still, like statues left out in the cold. The air around them carried a tension I couldn't place. I didn't stay to watch them. My own misery felt louder than anything else. I tilted my head to the sky as rain began to fall, the drops cold against my skin. No umbrella, just me, the rain, and my grief, blending together in the stillness. And then it happened. A hand, freezing cold and unnervingly solid, brushed against mine. I recoiled, spinning around, my breath catching in my throat. At first, I saw nothing, but then, slowly, something seemed to step forward from the shadows themselves. It was tall, inhumanly tall. Its silhouette was cloaked in black, its edges shifting like smoke trapped in a jar. Its face was wrong, a swirling, featureless blur where eyes, a nose, a mouth should have been. Yet, I felt it staring at me, as though its gaze pierced through the very air between us. Atop its head rested a black hat, its brim sharp against the dim light of the station. It spoke then, and its voice was a sound I cannot fully describe. It was low and soft, but it carried a weight, an echo, as though the words traveled from somewhere far beyond this world. I startled you, didn't I? That wasn't my intention. The words shouldn't have made sense, but somehow I understood them. My heart pounded in my chest, my feet frozen in place. What are you? I managed, my voice trembling. Its head tilted, the blurred face somehow conveying curiosity or amusement. People call me Nightmare, but you can call me Black Hat. I shivered, not from the rain, but from the sheer presence of it. The way it spoke felt deliberate, as if it enjoyed the weight its words carried. Why are you here? I asked. What do you want from me? It didn't answer immediately. Instead, it extended something toward me. A shape materialized in its long shadow-like hand, an umbrella. But it wasn't an ordinary umbrella. It was pitch black. No, darker than black, as if it absorbed every flicker of light around it. It seemed to pulse faintly, like it was alive. You can't walk in the rain like this, it said almost gently. I stared at the umbrella, then at the figure. My instincts screamed to run, but I couldn't move. Something about it, about him, kept me rooted in place. Reluctantly, I reached out and took the umbrella. The handle felt strange. Warm, but not in the way something natural is warm. Thank you, I whispered. That's when I saw it, or rather felt it. A smile. Its face was a blur, and yet the smile was there. Wide. Too wide. I could feel its edges curling in a way that didn't seem possible. I glanced down at the umbrella in my hands, trying to steady my breath. But when I looked up again, he was gone. Not a sound, not a trace. Just the rain and the quiet shadows of the night. I walked home, clutching the umbrella like a lifeline, my mind racing with questions I couldn't answer. But as I neared my door, I felt it. Something following me. Not footsteps, not movement, just a presence. Lingering. Watching. When I woke the next morning, the umbrella was gone. I searched everywhere, but it had vanished as if it had never existed. And yet, the feeling remains. Sometimes, in the stillness of the night, when the rain falls just so, I feel him, the weight of that unseen smile pressing into my mind. A reminder that some gifts are never truly free, and some encounters are never truly over. My dad sent me a strange message. By dark lights. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, restless, like I was sitting on pins and needles. My hand reached for the phone beside me, pressing the power button again. No new messages from my dad. The screen showed only the same 3 words he'd sent me 2 hours ago. Come here. Now. After that, the screen was filled with my frantic paragraphs and missed calls. None of them answered. I thought about texting again, maybe calling one more time. Instead, I dialed his landline. It rang and rang until the robotic voice of the answering machine cut me off. With a groan, I tossed the phone into the passenger seat and forced myself to breathe deeply. The air inside the car felt suffocating, like it was crushing my lungs. I rolled the window down all the way. The freezing wind slammed against my face at 120 kilometers per hour, filling the car. I didn't slow down. My foot stayed heavy on the gas as I tore down the empty I-70 highway toward the small town where my parents lived. The only light on the road came from my own headlights. The clock on the dash Read 1:35 a.m. I'd left just 5 minutes after Dad's text, and still had at least half an hour before I reached town. My mind was a demolition site of terrible scenarios. What if something happened to Mom? What if they'd been in a bad car accident? What if they were lost somewhere with no cell service? The more I thought, the harder I pressed on the gas. The engine screamed in protest. The cold air blasting through the open window was unbearable now, so I rolled it back up. I flicked on the radio, hoping music might calm me down. They say music helps, and for a few minutes it did. I found myself drumming my fingers along to the bass, the panic in my chest fading. Then my phone buzzed. The vibration against the passenger seat cut through the music like a knife. I shut the radio off instantly and snatched my phone. The notification read, "One new message. From Mom." The preview showed only the first 6 words. "Aiden, if you ever get a massage." I had to tap it to see the rest. My fingers jabbed the screen twice, then I entered my password. But the signal out here was terrible. The message wouldn't load. Frustrated, I glanced up at the road for just a second. And what I saw made me fling my phone across the car and grip the steering wheel with both hands. I slammed on the brakes so hard the car screamed, tires shrieking as I skidded sideways across the empty lane until I came to a stop. My first thought? I imagined it. It had to be. I blinked, rubbed my face, then twisted around, eyes straining into the red glow of my taillights. Nothing. Still, I eased the car onto the shoulder and slowly reversed. A few meters back, I saw him, standing perfectly still in the middle of the road, head turned toward me, eyes glowing white in my headlights. Matteo? I slammed the car into park and stepped out. The cold cut through me instantly. "What the hell are you doing out here, man?" He didn't answer. I walked closer. Matteo had been my best friend since childhood. He worked at a garage back in town, while I left for college. We didn't see each other much anymore, but we were still close. When I got within a few meters, he finally moved, slowly turning his whole body toward me. "My car broke down," he said flatly. He gestured behind him. A red Ford sat idling on the shoulder. I glanced at it. Matteo used to talk non-stop about how one day he'd buy a motorcycle and ride across the world, with me on the back. A Ford wasn't what I'd expected. But people change, right? I scratched the back of my neck. What exactly is wrong with it? I don't know. It just stopped. His eyes never left me. Not once since I'd stepped out of my car. And his voice, it wasn't right. Matteo always had a deep voice, but now it was deeper, like his throat wasn't his own. I let out a shaky laugh and clapped him on the shoulder. "Look, man, it's freezing out here. Let's leave the car for now. I'm heading into town anyway. You can ride with me, and tomorrow we'll come back and check it out. Sound good?" He only nodded. His expression never changed. "Grab whatever you need from your car. I'll wait in mine." Even as I turned my back, I could feel his eyes burning into me. I didn't push it. just walked back to my car. I was a step from the driver's door when something exploded against the back of my skull. White, hot pain. Someone had hit me hard. I collapsed, the asphalt rushing up. I wasn't fully unconscious. I saw the blood dripping onto the pavement beneath me, felt the warmth spreading down my neck. I tried to look back, to see who it was. Then another blow landed, and everything went black. I don't know how long I was out. When I woke, panic slammed into me like a truck, because I couldn't move. My arms were tied to the chair with thick ropes. So were my legs. My heart thundered against my ribs, shaking my whole body. Before I could even scream, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow at first, almost cautious, then louder, heavier, echoing in the small space around me. Someone was pacing the room, back and forth, just out of sight. "Who's there?" I shouted. No answer, just footsteps. "What do you want from me?" Silence. Then, movement in the corner of my eye. A shadow shifted. Shoulders, a familiar build. Matteo? He didn't look at me, just kept moving methodically, like I wasn't even in the room. Then he turned, and I froze, because in his hand was a syringe, the needle glimmering under the dim light. He walked toward me in measured steps. I couldn't even react before he grabbed a fistful of my hair, yanking my head to the side, and drove the needle into my neck. I screamed. My whole body jerked against the ropes. Then nothing. When I woke again, the air was colder. The first thing I noticed was the faint light of dawn creeping through a small, filthy window. The second was the sound. Metal on metal. At first I thought tools. A drill, maybe. Then the sound changed. Scraping. Grinding. No, it was sharper than that. Like a blade being sharpened. Matteo passed by me without a glance, heading to a steel cart in the corner. A surgical cart, the kind doctors wheel into operating rooms. On top of it, instruments, knives, scalpels, things I couldn't name. My body buzzed with static terror. I pulled at the ropes until my wrists burned raw. Nothing. Matteo turned holding a pair of scissors. "What are you doing?" I demanded. He reached for me. I flinched back. But he only snipped off a lock of my hair, dropping it into a small vial, and tucked it into his pocket. "Matteo, what the fuck is this? Untie me!" I screamed. The sound bounced off the walls, pressing back into my ears. He didn't answer, just moved back to the cart, calmly selecting another syringe. This one was empty. He stepped close, voice flat, mechanical. "Relax. Just need a blood sample. If you move, the needle will break off in your arm." My entire body seized with fear. I froze as he slid the needle into my vein, drawing blood. When he was done, he set the syringe on the cart. "Why are you doing this?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He didn't answer, This time, when he turned back, he was holding pliers. Big ones. No, I stammered. Wait! He didn't stop. The pliers opened around my finger. I thrashed, screamed. My vision went black around the edges. The pressure clamped down. The pain ripped through me like lightning. My scream echoed, broke, dissolved into sobs. And then, I swear to God, I saw him bend down, pick something up from the floor. My finger. He held it in his hand. And then I passed out. When I came to again, it was dark. Night. The room reeked of iron and rot. My head spun. I looked down and almost vomited. Where my finger had been, the bone jutted white through the shredded flesh, the joint barely hanging on, crusted in dried blood. The agony surged back instantly, tearing through me. Matteo, my friend, had tortured me, and now I was going to die here, in his basement. But I'm not someone who gives up easily. I looked at the ropes binding my left wrist. The knot was just within reach. I clawed at it, my trembling fingers working furiously, tearing skin, nails bending backwards. The footsteps came back, running this time. I yanked harder. My fingers slipped. Closer, louder. My heart pounded so hard it drowned out my own thoughts. I wasn't going to make it. The ropes wouldn't come loose. And when the footsteps stopped right behind me, I broke. Please, I begged, my voice cracked. Don't do this. He looked me up and down, sweat beaded on his forehead, and when his eyes landed on my face, I saw his pupils dilate. Aiden, so it's you. Are you okay? I didn't know what kind of game he was playing, but I knew I couldn't stand it. The closer he got, the heavier the fear pressed down on me. He must have noticed the worry on my face, because he backed away. It's okay, I won't hurt you. As he glanced around nervously, he did something I never expected. He untied me. While freeing my right hand, he muttered under his breath, "Did that bastard do the same thing to you?" I didn't say a word. When he loosened the last knot, I shoved him away with my body and rose from the chair. Stay back! Relax, Aiden, I'm not him. What? You literally tore off my finger. No, that wasn't me, I swear. He raised his hands like he was surrendering. Aiden, I know your head is spinning. I'll explain everything, but right now, please trust me, your friend, and let's get out of here. A muffled crash echoed from upstairs, like a vase shattering on the floor. Both of us instinctively looked up. Then Matteo turned back to me with wide, pleading eyes. He must be here. We have to go, Aiden, please. The sound came again, louder this time. Maybe he was tricking me. Most likely he was, but I was too weak from the blood I'd lost. I had no other choice. I nodded, and we slipped out the same door he had come through. We hurried down a short flight of stairs and into the main hallway. Matteo led, signaling me to stay quiet. To my shock, he pulled a small pistol from his belt. We didn't speak until we reached the front door and stepped into the garden. He pointed toward an old motorcycle. "Get on." Running after him, my patience broke. "You said you're not him. Then who the hell was that? And what did he want from me?" He didn't answer until he straddled the bike and started it. Just before I climbed on, he pulled out the pistol again. "If you see anything dangerous, shoot in my place." I shook my head. "Are you insane? I don't know how to use that thing." "It's simple. Take the safety off and pull the trigger. That's all." He shoved it into my hand. I tucked the gun into my waistband and grabbed hold of him as the engine roared. "There are things happening here you wouldn't believe even if I told you," he said, his voice muffled through the helmet. "What do you mean?" I shouted. "The townspeople. They're changing." "What?" "It started no more than a month ago. Do you remember Albert? The kid who worked at the gas station?" Albert. The same guy we used to steal beers from when we were younger. He hated us for it. But over the years, things settled down between us. I don't know if he was the first, but he was the first one I noticed. His behavior changed. He used to talk, laugh, hang out. Then suddenly, nothing. He stopped speaking altogether. Even when I paid, even when I asked questions, nothing. He just watched. His eyes bulged, blank. I thought maybe he was depressed, until a farmer found his corpse a few days later. Around 4 p.m., he said. And I swear to you, Aiden, I saw Albert at the gas station at that exact time, staring at me with those dead eyes. We rode in silence for a while, until I asked, "So, the one you saw wasn't Albert?" The police got involved. The body had no signs of struggle, just a missing pinky finger. A chill ran through me. I felt the phantom pain in my own severed finger. Then it spread. More and more people started acting strange. Whenever I walked down the street, they'd stare with those empty eyes. When I told my parents, they brushed it off as me being dramatic. They'd already forgotten about Albert. They told me to let it go. How could I ignore it, Aiden? Everyone was walking around like their souls had been ripped out. And when my parents dismissed it, I started to suspect they were the same. He paused. His right pinky was wrapped in a bandage. I hadn't noticed until now. I was right. They tied me up, did the same thing they did to you. Do you know how it feels to have your own parents cut off your finger? The pain is one thing, but the betrayal. His voice cracked. They tried to kill me. Afterward, I saw what they'd done to others. The furniture store downtown. It's filled with bodies. All the people they've killed. My parents? They're in there too. Rotting. I heard him sniff from inside the helmet. Compared to him, I'd gotten off easy. But then a terrifying thought hit me. Matteo, did you see my parents? He hesitated, then shook his head. No, I don't think so. Relief washed over me. Where are we going now? To Kansas City. I'm going to expose these bastards. Before I could reply, I noticed something. Over the roar of Mattia's bike, there was another engine. I looked behind us. At first, the road was empty. Then I saw it. A Ford. No headlights. Red. I knew exactly whose it was. Matteo! I screamed. The car swerved, nearly clipping us. Matteo veered sharply. The Ford pulled ahead and cut across our path. He gunned the throttle, but the car tailed us close. My palms were sweating and I started to slip from the seat. What do we do? I shouted. Before Matteo could answer, a gunshot cracked the air. The bullet missed me by inches. Matteo swerved again, but a tire blew out. The bike tipped, sending us tumbling. I hit the ground hard, my head slamming against the concrete ditch. My vision went black for seconds. When I came to, I saw Matteo lying motionless on the road. His helmet shifted slightly. He was alive. A shadow approached him. My stomach dropped. It was Matteo. The other Matteo. The fake raised his gun and fired. My friend screamed as blood sprayed from his hand. The imposter walked calmly toward him, ripped off his helmet, and revealed Matteo's real terrified face. Then he shot him in the head. I ducked into the ditch, shaking. The fake Matteo was searching for me. He would find me soon. I looked at the fallen motorcycle beside me. At my waist, cold metal pressed against my skin. The pistol Matteo had given me. His words echoed in my head. Take the safety off and shoot. I waited until his footsteps grew close. Then, in one motion, I stood and fired twice. One bullet hit his chest, the other his face. He dropped instantly. I didn't wait. I bolted for the Ford. The keys weren't in the ignition. I scrambled, searching, until I found them between the seats. As I turned them, the headlights flicked on, and there he was, Matteo again, standing in front of the car, staring at me. This time, his face and chest were caved in where the bullets had hit, but no blood poured out. It was like I'd shot a plastic doll. He raised his gun. Glass shattered as bullets tore through the windshield. I shielded my head, shards slicing my skin. He yanked the door open and dragged me out. His fist pounded my face like steel hammers until I thought my skull would crack. Then he pointed the gun at me. This was it. But the gun clicked empty. Before he realized, I kicked him hard, sending him crashing onto the hood. I dove into the car, slammed it in reverse, and ran him over. Then I shifted forward and hit him again. Again. His body crumpled like gelatin, oozing across the road. But it wasn't human. Not anymore. I sped away, straight to the nearest hospital. I didn't stop. I didn't even think about Matteo. I was too terrified, because deep down, I didn't believe he was dead. At the hospital, I stumbled inside, barely conscious, covered in blood and glass. I told the nurse to send help to I-70, where my friend was lying. Then I collapsed onto a stretcher. Miraculously, the doctors said I had only a fractured arm and cuts and bruises. They released me after 2 days. The police questioned me about everything. I told them all of it. Matteo, the doppelganger, my finger. They told me Matteo's body had been found, but only one. No trace of the other. When I asked what would happen if it came back for me, they brushed it off. They said the dashcam footage from the Ford was evidence enough. They believed me, or at least pretended to. Outside the hospital, an officer handed me my phone, said it had been recovered from the car. As I scrolled, debating who to call, a gray minivan honked in front of me. I froze. It was my father's van. I climbed in without thinking. My parents sat inside, staring at me. "How are you, sweetheart?" my mother asked calmly. I smiled weakly. "I'm okay. I'm just glad to see you." My father turned to me. "We're taking you home, Aiden." "Home? Back to the town? But it's not safe. Matteo told me." "Home is safe. We're going home." I leaned back in the seat, exhausted. But then I remembered the text. "Dad, you messaged me, told me to come to town. Why?" "It doesn't matter anymore, son. It's been handled." As I scrolled, I noticed another unread message from Mom, the one I hadn't finished reading the other night when this all began. "Aiden, if you ever get a message from your father or me telling you to come to town, don't do it. We already left Kansas. Strange things have been happening there. Call me as soon as you get this. And whatever you do, don't go to the town. Don't answer if they call. I know you're confused, but just know this: they are not us." When I looked up from the screen, my father was watching me in the rearview mirror. My mother slowly turned red, eyes locking on mine. "Is something wrong, son?" I forced a cough to hide the lump in my throat. "No." Now I'm here, in my old bedroom. The door is locked, but I can hear footsteps on the stairs. They're coming. I think my end will be the same as Matteo's. If someone finds this, if you're reading it near my body, heed my warning. Don't trust the people in that town. I don't know what they are, but they are not us. They are not us. They are. It Came from the Swamp by B.W. Byers, 2233. The story you're about to read is 100% true. The only things changed are names and locations have been removed. This isn't a joke. This isn't a gimmick. This story happened to my father. Before he passed away, he would tell this story to anyone who would sit down around a warm fire on a cold night. The body of this story is written in first person, as though my dad himself was telling it to you. Although it pains me that I'll never hear him tell this story again, it brings me great joy to share this with you. I always loved hearing my father tell this story, and I hope you enjoy it as well. So get comfortable, turn your lights off, and imagine with me that you're sitting next to me around a campfire, listening to my father tell us of his haunting tale. This story takes place in the autumn of 1977 at a camp that belonged to a friend of mine named Dave. I worked with Dave at Fisher Body, one of the automobile factories owned by General Motors. Dave had a camp in a swampy area and had agreed to let me bear hunt out of it. I wasn't alone on this bear hunting trip. My companions were my wife Sarah, little sister Whitney, and her husband Clive, and my hunting buddy Rick. There are many stories I could tell you about, but I will refrain. Both Rick and I brought our bear hounds with us. The hounds pick up a scent and run the bear until it trees, and then the hunters move in towards the tree for the kill. Bears have been known to kill or injure many a dog when they come out of the tree. But I've been very successful hunting bears in the UP, and by God's grace, I've never lost a single dog. Enough of that. Let's get to the tale. Bear season opened September 10th, and we were up for a 2-week hunt. We had gone bear hunting that morning, and we run a bear, but it avoided us. So we went back to the camp. There was me, Rick, Clive, Whitney, and Sarah. Me, Rick, and Clive were sitting there, and we got up and started a fire. We just sat around chit-chatting while the girls were in the cabin making dinner from a raccoon Rick had shot the day before. We had our hounds, and just before the girls called us in, all of my dogs I had tied up around the edge of the swamp jumped up and went right to the end of their chain and started barking at the swamp. We were looking down there, but it was just dark enough to where we couldn't see anything. Then, all at once, every dog went back to the tree I had them tied to and lay down, except one. They were all shaking and shivering, except for that one dog, that little shotgun. She was my little blue tick hound. She finally laid down, but she didn't act so scared as the others. Every one of Rick's dogs ran right in their doghouse. It was the strangest thing. If it had been a bear, they wouldn't have acted like that. They would have wanted to get after it. We went ahead and went in and had dinner. Then we went back out that night and had the fire going while we sat around and talked about the events of the day. The girls made dessert and called us in, so we went in and played euchre. That's what we play in Michigan. It was really warm for September that day, and after we got done playing cards, we all got ready for bed. We never thought about latching the screen door because of just how hot it was that night. So we went to bed, and in the morning, I heard the screen door open. And at 1 a.m., I heard the screen door squeak open and then thump shut. I heard something open, and I heard it stirring in the kitchen. The cabin was just 2 rooms. The dining room and bedroom were just one big room, and there was also a living room. There was no electricity, so it had a gas lantern hanging from the ceiling that hung down about a foot. The only other source of light came from the full moon coming in through a big picture window. There was a full-size bunk bed, and Rick was in the top bunk, and Sarah and I were in the bottom. You could see almost like daylight in the kitchen, and all at once I could hear something moving around. Whatever made the noise walked right in front of the table and turned just like it knew right where we were. It was standing right under the light, and it was humped over so it wouldn't hit its head on the light. Its arms were hanging down. They seemed like they were way past its knees because it was bent over. It was just standing here, staring at us. It looked right at me, and then I raised up on one elbow and was watching it. At first, I thought it was a bear, but then I realized it couldn't be because of its ears. I could see plain as day. They were on the side of its head like a human, not on the top like a bear. It just stood there staring at us. Every one of our guns were out in the trucks. We never had a gun in the cabin, which was probably a good thing. If I tried and failed to get to a gun, we all might have gotten killed. I just laid there, and it just kept staring at us. But it would just stand there. It would move his head and shift itself, but then it would just keep staring at us. And my dogs were outside just whining and carrying on, scared to death. If it would have been a bear, they would have been going nuts, but they were just whining. I had a big 8-cell battery flashlight that we would sit between the bunk bed and the day bed. It was there just in case someone had to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. They could just reach down there and get that light. It wasn't there. It was always there. I was gonna turn it on. I wanted to know exactly what it was. I didn't know whether Whitney had gotten it and went out earlier to go to the bathroom and didn't put it back or what, because it was always put in that one spot. It just watched me while I was reaching around. That's when I thought to myself, we were all Christians, so if he attacks, we would be fine. He stood between us and the only door out of the cabin. We would have had to go through him or around him. There was no other way out of there. Finally, I pretended like I was sleeping in an effort to make it go away. When I opened my eyes to take another peek, I saw that it had moved towards us. It was only about 5 feet from where I was laying. I started to panic and was getting ready to start fighting if I needed to, but then I heard the screen door open and thump shut. The dogs were just scared to death, but it never seemed to bother any of the dogs. It just left. So I just laid there. I couldn't go back to sleep. I just held my breath and prayed that it wasn't coming back. After I was sure whatever it was wasn't coming back, I slipped out of bed and crept over to the doorway. When I looked out into the night, I saw it peeking at me from around my truck. My blood ran ice cold, and I quickly, yet quietly, closed the main door and deadbolted it shut. Around 2:30 a.m., my sister Whitney woke up and had to go pee. She came over to me and said, Wyatt, what in the world is wrong with those dogs?" Trying not to cause a panic, I lied and said, "I don't know. Why?" She said, "Just listen to them. They're out there crying. There's something wrong." After a long and probably suspicious pause, she said, "I really have to pee. Will you walk out to the toilet with me?" wanting to do literally anything other than that, I said, "Yeah, sure I will." I reached out for the flashlight again, and I asked, "Where's that flashlight? I usually keep it right here." And she said, "Oh, I put it on the nightstand." And I reached over, and instead of putting it between the beds, she had set it on the nightstand. She pointed at the nightstand and said, I just set it up there. Figured it made more sense than having it between the beds where it can get lost." And probably for a good reason. There's no telling what might have happened if I pointed a flashlight at that thing. But anyway, I walked her out. I walked her and she took the flashlight, and I stood halfway between the outhouse and the cabin. She went to the bathroom and we came back in. The dogs were still all shook up. She shook her head and said, "I wonder what's going on. Something has them all shook up." Well, I didn't want to tell her anything. I was the only one that saw it, and as far as I could tell, we were safe now. Then, off in the distance, I heard a snap of a branch or something. Wendy stopped and asked, "What is going on, Wyatt?" I assured her it was just a raccoon, and we went back inside and back to bed. She gave me a curious look when I deadbolted the door, but she didn't say anything. By the time we'd got back to our beds, the dogs had settled down a bit. I took that as proof that we were going to be okay. I slept a little, and I got up about 5 in the morning because we like to leave at daybreak to go out looking for bear tracks. I started breakfast while the others woke up. We had eggs, potatoes, and some breakfast sausage. I started it, but Sarah finished making it. While they finished making breakfast, I put the dogs in the dog boxes on my truck. After breakfast, about 5:30 a.m., we all headed out. Whitney and Clive were in their truck, and the rest were with me in my truck. Dave had a cable across his drive, and after we got through the cable, down the trail about 300 yards, I got my dog Sport out. I would always put one dog down out in front of the truck and just drive slowly behind him as he went down the trail. He would go after the bear, and I would jump out of the truck and get the other dogs out and send them after him. We went down this one game trail, and he acted squirrely, like he didn't want to. He usually would drift back and forth, but this time he stayed right in front of the truck. He would go down a ways, and he'd stop and look back at me, nervous as a cat in a dog kennel. We walked this game trail all the way back to the highway where Rick and Sarah met us, and I got him and loaded him back into the truck. Then we went south on the highway toward the cabin about 3/4 of a mile and turned left on a trail that headed toward a lake that we knew bears liked to hang around. There was a big cherry tree that the bears couldn't resist. At that time of the year, they are dead ripe, and the bears were getting fattened up for hibernation. I went over to the cherry orchard and took Sport all through there looking for tracks on a scent trail. We almost always would start a bear in there, and he just didn't act right, so I loaded him back up in the truck. We went back down the road and turned south about 1/8 of a mile to another little trail. When we went, there was a little lake that I mentioned. I loaded him back up and drove northeast around the lake because it was a bit too bulky for me. When I got him back out, he caught a whiff of something and he froze in his tracks. He smelled something he really didn't like, but after some coaxing, I got him to keep going. So, in the meantime, I'm sitting on the hood of the truck so I can watch him better, and Sandra was driving the truck. So I had her stop and I slid off the truck and I started walking with Sport. Sport went down this trail and I walked down the trail behind him. The trail comes to a point on the back side of the lake. The swamp ran all the way from the cabin down to the lake. I followed him all the way to the end of that trail and he came to the end of that point and threw his nose up in the air and just stopped. And he just froze, staring down at the lake. He kind of growled a little bit and all the hair jumped up from his tail to his nose. It just bristled right up and he just stood there, staring down into the swamp. I started looking down where he was staring, but I couldn't see whatever he could. He looked at me and he just turned around and started back toward the truck, stiff-legged and breathless. I followed Sport, walking just as hard as I could go. I just knew that he saw something bad. The hair on the back of my neck stood up because I knew that if it had been a bear, Sport would have gone right down there after it. He headed right back to the truck, and I had the tailgate down on the truck. When we got close to the truck, he took off running and he jumped right into the truck and began trying his hardest to get into the dog box with my other dogs. I still hadn't told Rick and them anything about the night before, but I was beginning to think that I ought to. That evening, after we got back to the cabin, I told everyone what had happened the night before. Whitney was immediately angry and wanted to go home, and I said, "It never bothered us. It came in the cabin, but we'll make sure we shut the doors now." It just stood there looking at us. And anyway, we stayed up there. We had another full week to hunt. As far as I know, it never bothered us anymore, and I never bothered it. If I would have turned on that flashlight, there is no telling what might have happened. 4 months later, while on Dave and my lunch break at Fisher Body, he told me that he went back up to his cabin for a weekend getaway. When he got there, he saw that his cabin had been broken into and trashed. The only thing in there that wasn't ruined was on the bottom bunk, the bunk that Sarah and I were sleeping on. I didn't tell him about the experience I had, but I knew that whatever that thing was had broken in. I'm not sure what it wanted with us, nor why it went out of its way to deliberately preserve where I was sleeping. After all these years of telling this story to my friends, children, and grandchildren, I still don't know what it was. And I pray to God that I never find out. I work at a funeral home, and a body keeps showing up in the wrong drawer. By Aaron Is Not Funny. And you're listening to Creepypasta. I've been keeping track of the strange things that happen at the funeral home. Mostly because I realized a few months into the job that if I didn't start writing them down, I would either forget the details or convince myself that none of it had actually happened. I told myself that this would help, that writing the occurrences down would make sense of them, or at least allow me to sleep at night, but the truth is that writing only seems to remind me of how little I actually understand this place. Last week, something happened that unsettled me more than anything I've experienced so far, and I know I need to share it before I lose track of the details. This one started last week with a body that was, in every possible way, completely ordinary. The body arrived late in the evening, unremarkable in every way. Normal age, ordinary cause of death, regular paperwork. Nothing about him stood out to me when we moved him onto the operating table, except for the way that his arm shifted slightly when we adjusted the sheet, which I told myself was just residual movement, the kind you read about in training but don't really expect to see. Martin didn't comment on it, so I didn't either. We tagged him, logged him, and placed him in the refrigeration unit like we always do. The same one we've used since I started here, sliding the drawer closed into the seal caught with that familiar, slightly hollow sound that echoes more than it should in a room that small. I remember checking the label twice before I left. Not because anything seemed wrong, but because I had gotten into the habit of double-checking things after what happened with Daniel Crow. The next morning, I arrived earlier than usual, hardly out of habit and hardly because sleep has become a little more difficult since I started working here. After unlocking the front door and setting my things down in the office, I made my way back to the preparation room with the vague intention of getting a head start on the day's work before anyone else came in. The drawer was closed. That was the first thing I noticed. And for a moment it felt reassuring because it meant whatever I had expected to find, though I couldn't have said exactly what that was, hadn't happened. Then I opened it. It was empty. I froze, staring at the other drawers, my mind racing for a rational explanation. Maybe a janitor's mistake? Martin moving it temporarily, or a misread label? I stood there for several seconds looking at where the body should have been, trying to fit what I was seeing into something that made sense. There are only so many explanations for something like that, and all of them rely on the assumption that something ordinary has gone wrong in a way that can eventually be corrected. I checked the label again, even though I already knew it was the right drawer, and then I started opening the others. I went one by one, moving down the row more quickly than I probably should have, though I was still careful enough to make sure I wasn't overlooking something obvious in my haste. I found him 4 drawers over, positioned exactly as we had left him, sheet pulled up neatly, tag still in place. There was nothing to suggest anything had changed, except for the fact that he was no longer where he was supposed to be. I closed the drawer, paused, and then opened it again, just to confirm that I hadn't made a mistake. He remained where he was. When I told Martin, he listened without interrupting, his expression neutral in a way that I've come to recognize as intentional. When I finished explaining what I had found, he simply told me to write it down, as though that was the most practical and reasonable response to the situation. Time, drawer, anything else you notice? He said, already turning back to what he had been doing, which left me with the impression that this was not the first time something like this had happened, even if this was the first time I had been the one to notice it. The rest of the day was uneventful, and that night before I left, I checked the drawer again. I decided to let him stay in the drawer he was in when I came in that morning, but then, without really thinking about why, I marked the outside of the drawer. I pulled off a short piece of masking tape from the roll and stuck it over where the top of the drawer the body was, connected to the bottom edge of the drawer above it. That night, I went home with a small pit in my stomach, though I wasn't sure if I could explain exactly why. I knew that the body had freaked me out, But could I really convince myself, or anyone else, that the body had moved on its own during the night? I was one of the last ones to leave in the night, and I was the first to get there in the morning. Though any efforts I had put into easing my worries in the night were immediately undone the following morning. When I came to work the next morning, I skipped out on my normal morning routine and went straight downstairs to storage. To my relief, the drawer was still closed. But on further inspection, any hope I was feeling that I had imagined the events of yesterday left as soon as they had come. The mark was broken. The tape wasn't torn, but it had clearly been moved. It looked like someone peeled the tape off of the drawer, opened it, closed it again, and tried to press the tape back down to where it was before. I could tell that the tape had been removed because it was slightly creased and had a tiny dog ear fold at the top corner. And when I put my face closer to the tape, really trying to remember if I had just done a bad job at taping it shut yesterday, I could swear I saw a fingerprint on the tape. I remember feeling something settle in my chest at that point. Not panic exactly, but a certainty that whatever was happening was not the result of a mistake I could correct by being more careful. I steeled myself with a nervous, shaky breath, and I opened the drawer. It was empty, but this time I didn't hesitate. I moved through the others until I found him again, farther down, and positioned slightly differently than before. One arm dangled at just enough of an angle that I was certain it hadn't been the night before. Over the next few days, I documented everything. Not just the drawer numbers and the times, but the order I checked them in, the placement of the tools on the cart, the way the condensation formed along the inside of the unit doors, even the faint variations in the sounds of the refrigeration unit inside of the unit doors. Because the more I paid attention, the more it felt like the movement wasn't random. On the fourth night, I stayed late. I told Martin I had paperwork to finish, which was partially true, but I mostly wanted to see if anything would happen when I was there. Up until this point, all of the changes had occurred overnight, in that stretch of time where no one was watching. The building felt different at night, quieter in a way that seemed heavier rather than empty, like the absence of sound was itself something that had settled into the walls and floors. And when I stepped into the preparation room, I had the distinct feeling that I was interrupting something, though I couldn't have said what. The drawer was closed when I approached it, the metal handle colder than usual beneath my fingers. For a moment, I found myself hesitating, aware that this no longer felt like a routine action, but something closer to a confirmation of what I already suspected I would find. When I finally pulled it open, he was there, positioned exactly where I left him. The sheet was still drawn neatly over him, the tag still in place, and nothing at all to suggest that anything had changed. That should have felt reassuring, though it wasn't, because by that point the absence of change felt just as deliberate as the movements had. I stood there longer than I meant to, watching, listening, aware of the low, steady vibration of the unit beneath my hand, and the way the room seemed to hold its silence in a way that felt almost expectant, like it was waiting for something that hadn't happened yet. Eventually, I closed the drawer again, pressing it firmly until I felt the seal catch, and turned toward the door, already reaching for the light switch. I had all intentions of leaving, because there is a point where staying any longer stops feeling like observation and starts feeling like participation. And I was not sure which side of that line I was standing on anymore. Then, with my hand hovering just a foot or two from the switch, the lights went out. For a brief moment, the room existed only in the dim spill of light from the hallway behind me, enough to outline the edges of the counters and the shape of the refrigeration unit against the wall. It was enough light to barely see, but not enough to fill in the details. And it was in that in-between space where nothing was fully visible, but nothing was entirely hidden either, that I heard it. It was not loud, and it was not sudden. It was a slow, deliberate sound, like the careful shifting of weight across a surface. That kind of sound does not belong to machinery or settling buildings, but to something that is choosing to move. I did not turn immediately. Instead, I stood there with my hand still held up near the light switch, aware of the way the silence around the room seemed to deepen. I held my breath, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up one by one. Finally, a chill ran up my spine, and I worked up all of the courage I had left. When I turned back towards the unit, the drawer was open. Not partially, not slightly misaligned in a way that could be explained later, but fully extended with the metal track visible beneath it. The interior exposed in a way that made it immediately clear that it had not been left that way by accident. For a moment, I thought it was empty again. Then I realized I was looking at it from the wrong angle. It had been moved forward. Not dramatically, but enough that the sheet rested closer to the edge than it had before, the fabric catching lightly on the lip of the drawer as though it had been pushed off in that direction rather than placed there. I did not step closer. I did not reach out. I simply stood where I was, aware of the distance between us in a way that felt significant, as though it was something that could change without warning. After a few seconds that felt longer than they should have, I took a step back. I jumped when I was met with a clanging sound that echoed in the small room. The drawer didn't jerk or slide abruptly, but moved outwards in a small movement that caused it to extend out fully and collide with the end of the track. It stopped moving as soon as I did, as I froze in the middle of my backward step, startled by the sudden sound. I felt something shift in my understanding then, because up until that moment, I had been treating the movement as something separate from me, something that occurred independently and could be observed from a distance. I stepped back again, slower this time. The drawer followed, clanging into the edge of the track again. It wasn't by the same distance, but it was enough to make it clear that the relationship between my movement and its own was not coincidental. I stopped. It stopped. The room felt smaller then. Not physically, but in a way that made the space between us seem less reliable than it had before. Like it could close without any warning if I wasn't careful. I do not remember deciding to leave for the night, only that at some point I was no longer in the room, the light still off behind me, and the door closing with more force than I intended, the sound of it settling into the wooden frame louder than it should have been in the quiet hallway. I stood there for a moment, listening, half expecting to hear something from the other side of the door. Maybe another shift, another movement, something that would confirm that it had not stopped simply because I wasn't looking at it anymore. There was nothing. The silence returned, steady and unbroken, as though the room had arrested itself the moment I stepped out of it. And the next morning, when I returned to work like I always do, the drawer was closed. I stood in front of it for longer than I should have, my hand resting lightly on the handle, aware of the faint vibration beneath my fingers and the way it felt like it went straight through to my bones. My hesitation had become more pronounced than it had even last night, some part of me already understanding that opening it was no longer just a matter of confirming what could have changed, but acknowledging that it would. When I did finally pull it open, it was empty. I did not check the others right away. Instead, I turned, already aware of where my attention was being drawn, and found him on the preparation table. He was positioned neatly, the sheet folded back just slightly enough to expose his face to the overhead light. There was something different about him then, something subtle enough that I might not have noticed if I hadn't already been looking for changes, because his head had shifted just enough that it was no longer angled up in that familiar neutral position. His head was turned slightly towards the door, toward the space where I stood. I remained where I was, aware of the distance between us, aware of the stillness of the room, and aware of the uncomfortable certainty that whatever had been happening over the past few days was no longer contained to a pattern that I could observe and record without consequence. I stepped back into the hallway and closed the door, leaving everything exactly as it was. I went home earlier than usual that day, taking the same route I always take through town. The sidewalks mostly empty, the fog still lingering in the spaces between buildings where the streetlights don't quite reach. And for a while, the walk felt no different than it ever had. The sound of my footsteps steady against the pavement, the quiet of the town settling in around me in that familiar, muted way. It wasn't until several minutes had passed that I became aware of a second rhythm beneath my own, faint enough that I could have dismissed it as an echo or a trick of the way sound carries in the fog, but consistent enough that I could not ignore it once I had noticed it. I slowed, not abruptly, but gradually, paying closer attention to the spacing of my steps. I heard the way each one landed and lifted, and the sound behind me that adjusted with it. Not perfectly, not in a way that mirrored me exactly, but in a way that suggested awareness rather than a coincidence. When I came to a stop, the sound behind me did the same. Not immediately, but after a slight delay, as though whatever was making it needed an extra moment to register the change. I did not turn right away. Instead, I stood there listening, aware of the quiet pressing in on all sides, aware of how little there was to mask the sound if it chose to return. And when I finally looked back, there was nothing there. The sidewalk stretched empty behind me, the fog softening the edges of everything softly, until the distance became difficult to judge. For a moment, I considered the possibility that I had imagined it entirely, that the pattern I thought I had heard was nothing more than my own steps reflected back at me in a way I had misinterpreted. Then I started walking again, and after a few seconds, the second rhythm returned. Faint, measured, following. I have been writing it down even more consistently since then. Every detail, every change, every small inconsistency that refuses to settle into something I can explain, because it feels increasingly important that I keep track of where things are supposed to be, even if that understanding only lasts until the next time I look. But I have stopped trying to move him, and I have started paying attention to the spaces outside of the funeral home, because I can no longer ignore the possibility that whatever has been shifting inside that room might not be confined to it, and that the distance between where it is and where I am may not be as fixed as I once believed it to be. We built a 4-dimensional house. Shouldn't have walked on the roof. By Rowan Redfang, and welcome to Clancypasta. Architects are artists who tell space how to behave. We are taught from day one to respect the ground. We spend our lives fighting stress and begging gravity to let our work stand. Dahlia and I instead spent the last decade figuring out how to insult all of that. Because for thousands of years, humanity had been unaware that they were only building on the surface of the universe. The mountain wind bit through my coat with the scent of electric fumes and pine trees. I stood at the edge of the concrete platform behind a blast-resistant glass shield. The clearing around us was a crater we had ripped out of the forest, made of dirt and gravel, hidden between the Alps. General Hansen's squad had butchered over 40 acres of ancient pine to clear the perimeter. Dahlia stood beside me, her fingers tapping on her tablet. It glowed across her face and highlighted the exhaustion under her eyes. She hadn't slept in almost 48 hours, and neither had I. We didn't need coffee. Adrenaline running through our veins made even the cold wind irrelevant. I couldn't take my eyes off our life's work, what we had sacrificed our 30s for. Swimming through the pre-dawn mist on the concrete foundation was our monument to insanity. 8 individual cubes, each measuring 40 feet across, made from high-density polymers, tungsten, and steel. 4 of them were stacked vertically into a tower. The remaining 4 extended outwards from the 3rd floor, branching in all 4 directions, like a cross, or what it actually was, an unwrapped tesseract. The structure offended the natural landscape of the mountain. All around it was my wife Dahlia's contribution to my genius. The GFA, Gravitational Folder Array. A ring of 12 superconducting pillars, and black towers connected by cables filled with liquid helium to prevent overheating. And all those armed soldiers surrounding the structure were completely unaware that their rifles would be useless against mathematics. They kept shifting their weights in the cold. Pressure across the primary nodes is stabilizing. Generators are at a maximum capacity, Dahlia said, with that melody in her voice, like every time the numbers finally made sense. She tucked a lock of her dark hair behind her ear. She went on. We need the structural integrity to hold, Johann. The GFA is going to peak at almost 400 G inside the ring. If it buckles under the pressure, we're going to create a localized micro-black hole instead of folding the building. My work is fine, Dahlia, I said. I made sure to over-engineer the load by a factor of 5. I couldn't help but grin as I traced the lines of the building against the rising sun. We're about to force the universe to accept our new reality. A Nobel Prize awaits you, and the Pritzker for me. I chuckled. They'll have to invent new categories of awards after this. The gravel behind us crunched under heavy boots approaching. General Hansen stepped into the light, flanked by 2 soldiers and their rifles. He wore a parka over his uniform, exhaling clouds with each breath. From the look on his bearded face, I could tell he considered joy to be a tactical disadvantage. I couldn't remember ever seeing him smile. Aren't you planning your award ceremonies too early, Dr. Johann? He said, with that thick German accent. We've been freezing here for weeks now. I'm looking at 8 very expensive plastic boxes. Tell me you're not going to actually crush them. Explain to me again what we're buying before I choose to freeze the money instead of my men. I turned, ready to fend off his skepticism. To think that Dahlia and I were the only people in the world who understood the punchline to the greatest joke ever told to science. Imagine you take a cardboard box and put it in a hydraulic press, I said, gesturing at the structure. What happens? You flatten the box, the general said. Indeed, it doesn't disappear. All the material is still there, just folded into a lower dimension. It becomes a square, from a 3D object to a 2D. I understand how a trash compactor works, Doctor, and I don't like the thought of flattening 50 million euros of NATO funding. We're not crushing anything, I said, unable to keep that electric excitement out of my voice. I was shaking. We just compress a dimension. According to our calculations, the other 7 cubes will compress into the exact same coordinates as the first one without intersecting. They will overlap quantum mechanically. It's topology, Dahlia intervened. Her voice was the perfect counter to mine, calm and precise. The GFA generates a localized gravity well, so intense it will bend spatial dimensions inwards. It will project the building into a higher dimensional space and leave only a 3D cross-section behind. Hansen took a sip from his thermos, shifting his gaze up to my beautiful building. So, like a pocket dimension? You're telling me you can fit an entire base inside a closet? Yes, kind of, I said, clapping once and pointing a finger at him. Imagine infinite space on a finite plot of land. It will revolutionize urban planning, architecture, and storage. Hansen interrupted me. Deployment. A bunker that can't be hit by missiles because the interior doesn't exist outside it. Do it then, Doctor. Let's see where our money went. Dahlia and I exchanged looks. A decade had passed. A decade of failed grants and scientific mockery, of sleepless nights and broken prototypes, all conveyed between us in a single glance. She nodded and tapped a sequence on her tablet. We all put our earmuffs on. Our hands joined together on the safety switch mounted on the side of the console. Then we turned the key and pressed the interface. The earth shook when the GFA screamed like a giant beast. Its engines rumbled as massive amounts of power were released into the pillars, more than what could power an entire city. The air pressure dropped quickly and made our ears ring. A frequency followed that hit my chest and made my bones rattle and my teeth ache. The reaction assaulted our biology rather than our eyes. There was no flash of light or laser beams, It all happened just like in our simulation. The space between the pillars boiled, and the air turned into a violent but warm storm that melted the snow around them. I couldn't take my eyes off the building. Lights bent all around it, following geometric arcs that were impossible to predict. Gravitational lensing. That was the name. Like the light of a star passing behind a black hole. Even space itself warped, behaving like air above a jet plane. Gravity was pulling it inwards. All the steel stretched into a translucent distortion, slowly bleeding into the cube beneath. I tasted blood in my mouth, but I ignored it. We knew it would happen. Completely mesmerized, I watched the solid matter fold onto itself. The 4 cubes flanking the 3rd floor collapsed inwards through the center, drawn by the crushing gravity. The architecture was literally recalculating itself, folding angles that our brain could never process. And behind the building, the sky appeared to fracture into thousands of shapes, turning the visual into an ever-shifting mosaic of static. Geometry was melting, liquefying and sliding through the metal. We stared at the matter collapsing towards the central point, but at the same time remaining in the same place. The absurdity of the view made my stomach turn. I gagged, but forced my eyes to stay open. The scream reached its peak with a vibration that almost shattered the glass. With a shock wave of air that slammed dirt and leaves across it, the noise vanished. A perfect silence fell onto the entire mountain. When the ringing in my ears faded, I wiped the cold sweat from my forehead, and just then I noticed my nose was bleeding. Dahlia also had a thin line of blood on her lips, and so did Hansen and his soldiers. They moaned, holding their temples. I raised my gaze and looked past the cracked glass. The mist had disappeared, and not just that. "My God," I whispered. My towering cross of 8 cubes was gone. In the center of the concrete platform in the ring of black pillars sat a single cube. Just the ground floor. Hansen stepped forward with a face of shock that spoke for itself. "What happened?" he yelled. "Where's the rest of it? Did it disintegrate? You told me you were going to compress it, Doctor. Did you just destroy years of work?" I ignored him and stared, my palms and face pressing against the glass. "Dahlia, the telemetry?" "It's stable," she said, out of breath. Her fingers tapped across the tablet. "It's there. The mass readings on the platform haven't changed at all. It's still supporting the same weight as before. The spatial overlapping is holding. The W-axis compression is at 100%. She smiled at me, and so did I. The hypervolume folded successfully. "It worked," I said, trying to catch my breath. "It's all inside." Dahlia slammed into me. My legs were giving out, but my hands, still shaking, wrapped around her coat and held her tight. I buried my face into her shoulder with tears wetting the fabric. We hugged, ignoring the soldiers and the freezing wind returning. Like 2 people who'd spent the last 10 years digging a tunnel out of a prison, and finally found freedom. "Where did the other floors go?" the general asked. "It's all there," I said. "We just can't see the other 7 rooms because our eyes are locked into 3 dimensions. We're just looking at a single face of it." Radiation levels are negligible, Dahlia reported, her eyes darting between her tablet and the single cube. Gravity is normalized. Atmosphere is standard. We walked across the dirt towards the perimeter of the platform. Hansen followed us, flanked by his soldiers. Their faces paled in confusion. From that angle, the cube looked completely normal. Just a gray box of brutalist architecture with a door on the front and windows on the sides. So, the general said with a gesture towards the cube. Can we walk inside? Not yet, I answered. I was about to continue when I took a few steps to the right to get a better angle of the structure. And the magic happened. As my perspective shifted, the cube reacted. It moved. The front face containing the door contracted inwards and flattened into a sheet of light. At the same time, the left wall unfolded outwards to replace it. The door became a ghostly image that lingered for a second before bleeding and vanishing. It slid back into the center and became translucent, while a blank panel folded out from the opposite side. I stopped dead and watched in awe. My God, the general said. What the hell is that? One of the soldiers yelled, aiming his rifle at the cube. Do not shoot! We both screamed. Hansen drew his own rifle, taking a step back. Dr. Johann, the building is moving. You said it was stable. Why is it tracking us? I could hear both Dahlia's heart and mine hammering in the silence. I sidestepped to the right, and the cube reacted instantly. The wall retracted into an impossible center, and the face with the door came back, pulled from the interior to face me again. Its motions were so fluid and sickening to watch. It's not moving, and it's not tracking us, I said, taking ragged breaths. The knowledge hit me with massive force. Nothing is alive, General. It's just the projection. Speak English, Doctor, Hansen said without lowering his weapon. He's right. Dahlia stepped in front of him. Think of a normal 3D cube. If you look straight at it, you only see one face, a square. But if you walk around it, you see the other faces. What we're looking at is no longer a cube. This is a tesseract, a 4D hypercube. It possesses 8 cubical faces, but because it's now existing in a 3D space, it has to rotate its hypervolume to maintain continuity in our field of vision. It's not moving. Our movements are forcing its projection to recalculate. We can only perceive one cross-section at a time. Send the drone in, Hansen ordered. Nobody is stepping inside a building that can't decide what shape it is. A soldier carried a large drone. He set it on the concrete and stepped back. The front door of the cube could be opened via remote control. Dahlia tapped on her tablet and, with an echoing screech, the door swung open. Inside, the lights were on. The interior looked just like before. Sterile walls and a table bolted to the floor. In the corner, the staircase leading to the second floor. The drone rolled on the concrete and crossed the threshold of the cube. We all gathered around the monitor of the soldier handling it. The camera feed showed a perfectly normal view. The lighting was fine. The table showed no visible changes. Upstairs, I said, as we all stared in silence. Make it proceed upstairs. The soldier nodded. The drone rolled towards the staircase and raised its mechanical legs to begin a slow climb. None of us dared make a sound. We stopped breathing as the images appeared on the monitor. The drone reached the top of the stairs and rolled onto the second floor. I don't understand, Hansen said. He pointed a finger at the screen. The drone is going up, but there's no second floor there. Where is it going? Because it worked. The internal volume is maintained. The second floor exists within the folded dimension, Dahlia replied. He didn't answer. The drone reached the second floor, transmitting footage of the room and its pristine walls and window. Hansen was no longer looking at the monitor. I followed his gaze. So did Dahlia, her face paling. Hovering over the cube, directly above the center, was the drone. Instead of flying, it stood there, existing in a space that our eyes couldn't understand. Its shape stretched and twisted to infinity like a graphic glitch. It folded open, showing the internal wiring and circuits, all the gears and treads, the camera lens, everything occupying the same visual plane. We were looking at an autopsy of a robot floating above the cube. But the monitor still showed the images from the inside without issues. As it moved, the metal skeleton kept distorting into long spikes and snapping back into a cluster made of all its components. Inside the building, it was still navigating the second floor intact. It's moving through the W axis, I whispered. It's not broken, we're just seeing the light escaping the folding. That's its cross-section passing through our dimension. That's fascinating. The view was horrifying, but it was also the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. We'd done it. General, prepare the suits, I said. We're going in. 2 of the last 10 years went into designing those, just for this moment. Thick shells over a flexible membrane, with an exterior of layered polymer that caught the sunlight. The helmet sealed at the neck with a pressurized collar. The 4 security locks clicked, one at a time. We looked like something between deep-sea divers and astronaut. Dr. Johann, you want me to put this on while my men are securing the perimeter in winter clothes? Hansen said, pulling at the gloves of his suit. This feels a bit excessive. If you prefer to walk in without one, Dahlia intervened. Be our guest, General. You said the building is stable. Indeed it is, I said, working the zipper on my torso. But we're not. Our bodies are still 3D. That stops being trivial when we cross that. I pointed towards the cube. The GFA compressed the volume across a W-axis that we don't possess a sensory organ for. If we walk in there without protection, every cell in our bodies will be trying to occupy the same coordinates as themselves. Our organs would unfold outside of them. The general didn't answer. Dahlia finished the explanation. The suits enforce boundary conditions. They keep our body's location consistent. In short, they will tell the universe that we are still 3-dimensional in a very angry way. Hansen grunted, looking unhappy with the explanation, but he put on the helmet. The suits were wired, 4 cameras each, 1 in each direction, and microphones. The soldiers outside would have a live feed. Or so we thought. Dahlia had done the math on what happened to electromagnetic signals when they crossed a dimensional edge. But we chose not to share that with the general yet. He grabbed his rifle and led the way. We crossed the platform. 3 people who had run out of things to say. The cube sat there in the center of the ring of pillars, like something people would worship. A puzzle waiting to be solved, or a warning begging to be heard. The mist had cleared, leaving behind a sky too blue and clear, like the world itself wanted to observe. Hansen walked in first, raising the rifle to shoulder height. To greet us was the most normal banality, just as all the times we'd gone in before. The walls, the table. On the opposite side, a window showed the mountains and the line of pines. The sunlight came from the distance and formed a yellow glowing square on the floor. Nothing told us we were navigating a hyper-volume. "Smells like a construction site," Hansen said. Dahlia's helmet shook slowly. "No, it doesn't. We can't perceive smells through the suit. It's a phantom sensation." She checked the reading on her tablet. Atmosphere is standard. Oxygen at 21%. Gravity is 9.81. She glanced towards the window. Visual from outside is undistorted. "Of course," I said. "We're still in the 3D section." The drone sat at the top of the staircase where it had stopped, intact. Its light blinked green and steady. Might have sounded silly, but I felt affection for it. It went in first and came back fine. The first human-made object to step in a 4D space. A hero robot. Humanity would remember it like the first man on the moon. I smiled. The staircase ended in a square hole in the ceiling. The normalcy in our footsteps' noise made cold sweat run behind my neck. Hansen swept the barrel of his rifle across the room as he approached the staircase. "Keep a tight formation." "General, there are no living entities in this structure," Dahlia said, following. "Furthermore, your weapon is about to experience some unfolding. I suggest you leave it downstairs." Hansen ignored her. His helmet pointed up, eyes locked on the top as he climbed the first step. We followed close behind, boots echoing in the narrow space. Each step felt too ordinary, and for that reason, my teeth couldn't stop chattering. We moved at a snail's pace. It took a lifetime to reach the top. When we stepped onto the second floor, none of us moved or said anything. Hansen stood with both hands at his sides and his rifle down. I watched him, trying to understand that there was indeed a second floor, that it existed, had walls and a floor and lights and windows, and that his rifle was no longer a rifle. It had unfolded, just as Dahlia and I predicted, just like our bodies would have done without the suits. In the same way a book opens, but on its own. The barrel extended, flattened, and at the same time curved into itself. The body peeled along an axis that our brains couldn't comprehend. Everything spread outwards into an arrangement of components that were still connected, but pointed everywhere and nowhere, like a schematic. Hansen dropped it and stepped back. It became a smear of its own components and settled into a tangle of metal and plastic. The thud bounced off interconnecting walls. Hansen yelled, "What the hell is that? You said it would break." "We said it would unfold," Dahlia clarified. "That's the accurate term." "There's no reason it should do that." "Oh, there's every reason for it to do that," I said. The conversation died when we raised our gazes. The room had done the same thing the rifle did, but in a larger way. Facing me was the north wall, or what I thought was the north wall. It occupied the same space in which the floor should have been, and both surfaces were visible. Below us, no, not below, through us, the first floor was visible without a gap, but through what I called an overlap. The window was on the east wall, but also on the south wall. It showed the outside, a band of compressed images along the edge of my vision. Trees and concrete stretched and compressed like crumpled balls of paper. The nausea came back stronger when I looked around. I was about to throw up. The walls were transparent. I was viewing the first floor from an angle that shouldn't exist. Our little hero, the drone, sat there, all its internal body stretched into a glitch, its anatomy looping endlessly. "If we had walked in without these suits," Hansen muttered. "Instantaneous death," Dahlia answered. "Our topology would have attempted to recalculate to fit the 4D space," I added. "All our organs and skin and bones and veins. They would." "That's enough, Dr. Johann. I got it." Hansen walked towards the window with careful steps over a floor that intersected with the world below. He tried to communicate with his soldiers, but was met only with static noise. "Oh, we expected that," I said. "Radio waves in a 4D space propagate in a hypersphere rather than a sphere. In a folded environment, the propagation path doesn't end where the receiver is. The signal has nowhere to arrive. Think of it like trying to deliver a package to an address that exists on every road on the planet. So we're isolated." "We've always been," Dahlia said, with no worry in her voice. "We just couldn't prove it until now." The light shifted. The entire room darkened. I caught something at the edge of the window. Darkness, like a shadow moving. It crossed the mountains and the structure, and it was gone in a second. Could it have been a cloud? It made sense. The sunlight traveled inside the building, after all. "Did you see that?" Hansen asked. Gravitational glitch, probably," I answered. "With the GFA bending the space, visual artifacts are to be expected." We climbed to the third floor. It required concentration. The distortion made the distance between the steps impossible to understand. When we reached the top, my obsession peaked. The only way to describe the floor was a theorem. As we came up suddenly, there were 5 rooms, and none of them had a door or even a wall between them and us. The corridor, walls, bathroom, the bedrooms, and the studio we'd built around the middle room, all were accessible at the same time. Their interiors folded open. The porcelain of the bathtub intersected with the mattress of the bedroom. Studio desks floated inside closets. "This is unreal," Hansen commented, spinning once. "It's real," Dahlia whispered, "and spectacular." To a 3-dimensional observer watching from outside, we must be teleporting, I said. If we walked to the studio, we'd just appear there. Dahlia crouched beside the bathroom wall, which was also every other room's wall and also the floor. I watched as her hand reached into the bedroom, moving through nothing, where the walls unfolded. She lifted a pen from the desk, and it came back to her hand, unfolding itself like everything else. Did you just grab that through the wall? Hansen said. Object retrieval across boundaries with no physical transit, she said, holding the twisting thing up. Technically, there is no wall, I said. The 5 rooms share 3D space, so their surface distributed into the available geometry. Imagine a house drawn on paper, all flat. A 2D person living inside, the drawing must move through its doors because the walls are impassable. But for you, looking down at the page, everything can be reached without touching a single door. The walls can't stop you because you are approaching from an axis that doesn't exist for the second person. That's us, right now. We are standing above the page. I should stop asking questions, Hansen said. There was a table in the studio, which we'd put as a simulated habitation test, and from the higher dimension I could see the top and the bottom at the same time. I could see inside the drawers. Dahlia ran her measurements again. Atmosphere still standard and gravity at 9.6. Interesting. A small deviation, but not alarming. Radiation increased slightly, but still way below dangerous levels. As the general inspected the floor, attempting to pick up objects through walls, we collected data, talking and comparing numbers. And so, we heard it. First came a vibration. A frequency that our microphones caught before our ears did. It rose into a moan, deep and uneven, something that didn't fit any scale we could identify. The closest thing I could compare it to was a whale's lament, but it came from above. At the same moment, the light dropped again. This time, all the rooms darkened for several seconds, as if something was passing between the sun and us. Can visual artifacts make noise, Dr. Johann? Hansen said. We don't know, Dahlia answered, and I knew her too well to see how much those words hurt her to say. The readings are normal. Nothing spiked during that. No pressure change, no radiation anomaly. Nothing. It might be dimensional resonance, I said. In a folded space, the geometry is touching the adjacent regions. Sound might behave differently. Instead of propagating through a medium, it goes through the shape of space itself, and the shape of space here is... I gestured, unsure of what to say. I don't know. Maybe an acoustic artifact from the fold itself. From the fold? Hansen echoed. Like an echo, from the shape of the room instead of the room. The staircase to the last floor felt steeper, harder to climb. We didn't need the readings to notice the air was different, heavier, holding a certain resistance, the same way air feels before a huge storm. When the pressure drops and the body knows before the eyes see it. Our suits register the change. Gravity is at 8.8. We've lost over 10%. Dahlia held her tablet up. Radiation went up 40%. Still within safe levels, but it spiked. Pressure is down 8%. She turned to face me. Johann, this wasn't in our simulations. Is that a problem? Hansen asked. I wanted to tell him no, that everything was fine. It means the fold here is affecting more than the physical geometry. There might be let's call it a battle between the compression and the gravitational field we hadn't accounted for. Will the suits hold? They will. They can hold more than this, Dahlia confirmed. We stepped towards the windows of the 4th floor, and outside, the world had broken. It had said a huge fuck you to perspective. It took me a minute to understand what I was looking at. The soldiers down there, all of them, I could see every single one, were visible in their entirety. No, not through their clothes or skin. Through everything. Their full architecture flattened in the same space as their bodies. Muscle stretched over bones, opened like a blueprint. Their lungs pulsed with each breath, and the blood traveled through arteries across the whole body. They walked around and talked to each other, unaware we were looking at them from a dimension they couldn't see. To another person, it must have been horrifying. To me, it was the most intimate thing I'd ever seen. "My men!" Hansen yelled when he looked out. "They're fine, General," I said. From their position, nothing changed. We're just looking at them from above the page. Remember? They only look like that from up here. Hansen stepped back and didn't look again. Dahlia took her measurements as I photographed every overlapped surface. We checked every reading and talked to each other at a speed that made it sound like a foreign language to anyone who hadn't spent a decade on this project. I laughed when she made a joke, a good one that nobody else but the two of us could get. The last staircase loomed in front of us, ending in a metal door. The roof access. In the exact position where we'd built it. And that never sparked any particular interest in me, until that moment. The air was becoming too dense, and the gravity was playing unfunny jokes, but I wanted to do it. I had to. Observe the world in full tetradimensional space. I had to see what was on the other side. "We have sufficient data," Dahlia said. "We should head back." Her face through her helmet was something I couldn't read. For the first time since we'd met in middle school. We were both doing the calculation, but not the same one. "We didn't come this far only to go back one step from the finish line," I said. "We came this far to collect data, Johann, and we have enough. We've proved the hypervolume exists. The space is too volatile. But there's more above us. That's the problem. There could be too much above us." Hansen stepped between us, facing me. "I'll say this. Whatever made that sound earlier came from up there." He pointed at the roof door. "And my opinion about sounds I can't identify is to not walk towards them." It was an artifact. We're literally bending space-time. Oddities are to be expected. "You said you didn't know what it was, Dr. Johann." "I just don't know what category it belongs to. We've spent 10 years building this door, and I'm not refusing to open it now that it stands in front of me," I said, too loudly, stepping past both of them and climbing the distorted steps 3 at a time. "This is the paradigm shift. I am documenting the roof." They rushed, trying to stop me, but I grabbed the handle and pushed the door open. I stepped out, and the sky stepped in. Literally. I stood on the roof of a hypercube, right at the top of the dimensional boundary. The sky had become an intersection of all possible skies, with every point visible as a volume instead of a surface, coming from all directions at once. Its layers curved and looped around each other, through cloud formations existing in their full 3D shape instead of a flat ceiling. The atmosphere became an ocean of fractals with impossible geometry and colors that I'd never seen. And I could see time. Echoes of snow falling upwards, crossing the light of billions of different galaxies overlapping into a singularity. This is beautiful. Dahlia gasped behind me, mesmerized. Hansen said nothing. We all looked up in awe. We spread across the roof and walked around. The data kept coming in faster than we could process it. Electromagnetic fields, pressure, gravitational waves, an atmosphere at an altitude we were and were not. And in all that, I couldn't stop talking. I must have said the words Nobel Prize 10 times. We were going to rewrite all the basic principles of physics. No, of all science. We stood where nobody had ever stood before in the history of the universe, in the hypervolume of a folded dimension, and we looked at it from above the page. The building vibrated before our suits registered it, and the light changed again. This time we could see it clearly. The entire sky darkened from every direction at once, and we all knew this wasn't how darkness worked. This wasn't how anything worked. The sound came again, longer and louder. It came from inside the vibration, from above. We looked up just as it arrived. I had no idea what I was looking at. My brain tried its best to find logic in it, but the numbers were all wrong. The world was wrong. A surface, or better, a membrane, except it was neither. As we watched, it shifted. One moment there was a sheet of glistening material that moved with the typical irregularity of a living being. The next moment, it folded out into a shape my eyes couldn't process. Not just because of its instability. That valley of pulsing red mountains slid with calcified columns like the supports of the cathedral made of flesh and bone. It materialized out of nothing, spanning miles and miles, and faded into waterfalls of black fluid. The tissue sliced into the three-dimensional space, constantly warping and folding. On Dahlia's tablet, the gravitational readings did something we never expected. It dropped, faster and faster. 3, 2, 1. Then it reached 0. What happened next was wrong. It went against every law of physics. It dropped below 0. That minus sign before the number mocked our pathetic human brains. It had to be wrong. The device had to be broken. Negative gravity? What nonsense was that? Our feet left the roof. I had no time to be surprised, but enough to anchor myself on the roof door. The gravitational pull was no longer downward. My vision twisted and slowly rotated until the sky was below me, like an endless ocean, and the roof was now a ceiling. Hansen floated in the air. Both his hands grabbed my ankle. Below him, dangling over the 40 ocean, Dahlia clung to Hansen's belt, her boots kicking the empty space. "Johann!" she cried out. "Hansen, don't let go!" I shouted. As the pull intensified, the most horrifying hypothesis came to my mind. Whatever that thing passing through the three-dimensional space was, it must have been so massive that it possessed its own gravitational field. That's when I realized what we saw was only the 3D projection of something much, much larger. Just like a cube appeared as a square on a 2D surface, showing a fraction of its real size. How massive was that thing? I had no idea how to describe it. The shape in the sky below us kept changing and moving. The darkness had become absolute, like floating in open space. It covered everything. "Pull," Hansen said. "I am pulling." But neither of us moved, because there was nothing to move towards. The door was the only fixed point remaining. The entire building was shaking. The thing below us was still there, moving, passing, arriving and departing in every direction at once. Hansen's hand slipped from my ankle, and I managed to twist and grab him with one hand just in time. But the grip was weak. "The suits are failing," Dahlia shouted. The exoskeletons groaned and bent under the immense gravity. I'm slipping," Hansen said. I clenched my jaw so hard, tasting blood. The pull of that thing was astronomical, but this was no attack. Whatever it was, it didn't even acknowledge us. We were just ants, caught in the gravitational destruction of a passing god. 3 fingers, then 2. Hansen's hand slipped. I watched as they fell. The edges of their suits first flickered in the same way the drone had done from outside. Their bodies appeared to me in cross-section, and then in a section I had no name for. They stretched along the W-axis. "Dahlia!" I screamed. They fell into the sky, plummeting towards the endless expanse of red and white. The 3D barriers of their bodies ceased to exist. They elongated into a loop of infinite ribbons made of cross-sections of their internal structures. Their limbs stretched for hundreds of feet down the void, like falling into a black hole. Among the unfolding structures, flattening and adding more colors to the sky, I saw their eyes, massive and distorted, staring up at me, and filled with such an agony that it broke my very soul. Their screams came through the comms, and after a second, they turned into a loud, electric static. When the light returned, my vision rotated again. Gravity slammed me on the roof floor and left me lying on the concrete with the 4D sky back above me. My shoulder broke with a sickening crack. I screamed, not from pain. I screamed until my throat burned and I choked. I dragged myself towards the stairs and rolled down. I stumbled blindly through the lower floor, crying. On the second floor, Hansen's rifle was still on the floor, unfolded. The drone continued its mapping. On the first floor, the world returned 3-dimensional. A soldier caught me when I stepped outside. I burst through the front door and ripped the helmet off my head. Then I vomited bile and blood onto the concrete. I woke up to a hospital ceiling. Radiation, they told me. I'd been exposed to massive amounts that the suit failed to protect me from. They'd never stopped questioning me about what happened, but I hadn't managed to speak a single word. The doctors looked afraid of telling me the truth. Weeks, or a few days, most likely. That's how long I have left. I'm in a bed with a window that faces the city and the sky above it. An ordinary sky. A blue two-dimensional surface. I'm tired and my hands are cold. 10 years we spent building a door to somewhere nobody could have ever reached. We proved it was there, that we could go in and come back, or that at least I could. Once. And then pay the price from beyond the grave. I know Dahlia's not dead. I want to clarify this. Her suit didn't break last time I saw her. In higher dimensions, time is just another direction one can move. She must be stretching across eternity in a moment of biological unfolding that never ends. But she's up there, and I'm going to meet her soon. Who knows? Maybe all of us are going to very soon. Because just a moment ago, a sound echoed through the glass, coming from the sky. Deep and steady, like a whale's lament. Just when the light shifted and the room darkened for a second. That shift, when something passes between you and the light. It swam across the sky. I saw it, eclipsing the entire planet. A colossal section of glistening muscle and bone. Its shape changing and moving in every direction at once. Bleeding from its higher dimension into ours. I'm sorry. I brought it here. I don't know when it's going to tear the sky open, but I know that the sirens won't even have time to start. I just hope I'll be gone before that. I tried to rush a bonsai by Bilbo Cheated, and you're listening to Creepypasta. I think I have time to write this. Things have calmed down for now. I have my chair wedged against the door, just in case. There's tapping at the window. I'm on the second floor of my house, and there used to be no trees outside my window. I need to find a way out, and this message needs to get out so no one makes the same mistakes. We have to go back a few months for you to understand. I just moved to this new rental home. The only issue is that the landlord did not allow pets, which seemed criminal with the large fenced-in yard. I asked anyway. No pets, he said. I've been burned before. What if I kept up the garden? I asked. Would that change anything? About the dog? No. What about the rent? He looked out at the yard like he was already disappointed with the job I would do. Spring and summer only, he said. That's when the yard will need work. If it starts looking like hell, the discount goes away. Yes, sir. Tools are in the basement. That should have been the end of it. Discounted rent and some yard work. But I still wanted something to scratch that itch. Bonsai was an option. I'd never really considered it before, but I went all in watching videos, reading forums, buying those expensive little pruners. I learned about wiring trunks, exposing roots, and shaping miniature trees over the years. That was the issue. Years. Most of it just waiting around, especially in the first couple of years. Decades pass before you have anything impressive. Some trees are relatively faster growing. I still wanted the satisfaction of growing the tree from a seed, but I just didn't have the patience for it. One night I decided to buy seeds. I had to go deep into Google to find non-sponsored links. I wanted seeds from a specialty vendor. On about page 9, I clicked on a site. I can't remember the name, but it had to do with accelerated seed stock and touted seeds that can produce mature-looking bonsai in months. The site looked old, with a white screen, grainy pictures, and blue links. I clicked on one photo link that looked like a Chinese elm. There were no Latin names that I recognized on the site. I am embarrassed by the price I ended up paying. The product had all 5-star reviews, so I was hopeful. One of the most peculiar details that I can remember is returns only accepted in original soil and original shipping container. I bought a packet of 3 for a discounted rate and never received a confirmation email. I got back on the site the next morning, and that listing was gone. I thought it was a scam and got a new debit card to be safe. 2 weeks passed, and I was surprised by a small but heavy box at my doorstep. The outer cardboard shipping box didn't seem to be postmarked, but I was too excited to care. The inner box was wooden and closed with a brass clasp. The inside was lined with a grayish-blue metal. At the top of the small container, there was an instruction card. Germination stock, 3. Use dehydrated soil puck, enclosed. Keep contained indoors. Do not overwater. Keep in a well-ventilated location. Do not allow root access beyond pot. Odd? Yes. But I laughed this off at the time as some branding gimmick. The seeds themselves were larger than I had expected, and I noticed they were warm when I planted them in a small pot in the corner of my den near the floor vent. After a week, I thought I'd been scammed. No growth. But one morning, I woke up to a small green stalk. Finally, one was successful. From there, things seemed normal but fast. Within a few weeks, it had a tiny trunk with a branching structure ready to be wired and shaped. I was so happy with the results so far, I wanted to leave a review, but I couldn't find the site. I was so pleased that I even started posting photos to show off the growth. My friends were impressed, and the internet thought I was either lying about the age or accusing me of buying it from a nursery. One commenter even suggested that I had misidentified the tree species. These accusations didn't make me angry. They made me proud of my work. It was worth every penny. Soon it was time for pruning to shape the limbs. I spent some time studying the tree before making my first cut. When I did, dark sap began to ooze from the wound. My mouth began to taste as if I had just swallowed my car keys. I hope it isn't diseased. I took all the precautions, I thought. I opened the pruners around the second branch. Before I could close them, another branch snapped across the back of my hand. It cut me like a bad paper cut. I told myself, maybe I bumped it and shifted the branches. Or maybe it's a draft. The AC just came on. I finally managed to prune it properly, but I was worried about the sap's smell. But it did its job and sealed up the wounds I caused, and by morning the tree had pushed out new buds from the pruned branches. A few weeks later, the tree had grown enough that I wanted to move it to a larger, nicer bonsai pot. Repotting would also let me expose part of the root system. I thought it would enhance the beauty of the tree. I could also use this to change to a premium bonsai soil mix. I was surprised by the weight of the pot. I had to use twice as much strength as I thought to even get it off the table. I almost dropped everything when I encountered more resistance. As I looked back, I noticed the thick, pale roots had grown through the drainage holes. As I tracked it, my eyes traced over to the air vent. The roots had gone between the grates and down into the vent. I didn't want to hurt the tree. Bonsai roots can be delicate and are vital to the health of the plant. I didn't want all of this to go to waste. I tried to gently tug it free, but it wouldn't budge. On a closer look, there was a network of pale roots snaking into the darkness of the ductwork. On the one hand, I could just leave it alone, but I want this in the new pot, and I can't have roots growing into the HVAC system. I decided to cut it, and when I did, the roots seemed to recoil, and the detached side fell into the ductwork. That sharp metal taste filled my mouth. And with that taken care of, the rest of the potting went well. The tree was in its new pot with its alabaster roots on display. It was absolutely beautiful. For a day or two, everything seemed fine. I noticed the cut root had grown out of the drainage hole of this new pot. It seemed to be growing toward the air vent again. I moved the pot away from the vent, but the next morning more roots had curved down the sides of the pot, heading in the same direction. I decided to trim these to keep everything in the pot. Overnight, the tree dropped leaves and looked less healthy. I felt guilty. I tried to rationalize that maybe it wasn't getting the ventilation it needed, and this was its way of meeting its needs. From there, little things began to happen that I didn't notice enough to care about. The den started to smell like soil, which I thought was due to the newly exposed roots. Then I started to find dust around the air vents in the house. And last month, my water bill spiked, which I thought was related to a tapping I had been hearing in the walls that my landlord refused to come check out. A couple of days ago, I had people over for a housewarming party. It was the first time most of my friends had seen the place. I cleaned more than I needed to and rotated the bonsai on the side table so that the light hit it just right. The trunk had thickened into this elegant curve, and the exposed roots wrapped over the stone it sat on like pale fingers. The leaves were glossy and dense. It looked like something ancient that I had inherited, and people noticed immediately. "Wait," Emily said, leaning over it with her drink in her hand. "Is this the same tree from your pictures?" "Yeah." "No, it isn't." "It is," I said proudly. "You planted this, what, 3 months ago?" Something like that." She looked at me like she had caught me in some lie, but that quickly turned to concern. "That's not normal." From the kitchen, somebody said the den smelled like a greenhouse. Someone else said it smelled like pennies. I pretended not to hear that. I haven't smelled anything in weeks. Mark wasn't a bad guy. He just makes mistakes when he is drunk. Toward the end of the night, he crouched in front of the bonsai with a beer in his hand and gave it a serious look. "This is fake," he said. I ignored him. "It looks fake," he said, louder. "That means it's doing well," I said, trying to dismiss him. "You bought a tiny plastic tree and invented a whole personality around it." He reached out and flicked one of the leaves, not hard, just enough to make it move. I stepped toward him before he even realized I was doing it. "Don't." The room went quiet. Mark held up both hands. Sorry. Didn't know you and Bonnie were serious." A few people laughed. I did too, because I needed him to move on. Then he tipped his beer toward the pot. "Banzai!" The whole room laughed as a little beer spilled over the rim and darkened the soil. "Mark!" I scolded automatically. He looked at the pot, then at me. "Relax, it's a tree." I feel stupid now, but I was angry. A protective kind of anger, like he had done something to hurt a family member. I got paper towels and dabbed at the soil while everyone moved on. Someone changed the music and the room loosened again. The rest of the night was normal. People drifted between the kitchen, the den, and the back patio. The weather was nice enough now to keep the back door open for a while. I had a cooler outside by the steps because my fridge was full. At some point, I remember Mark announcing he was going out to grab another drink, looking at Bonnie, and asking, "Want one, babe? Be right back." He went through the kitchen and out the back door and just didn't come back. Nobody noticed for a while. By midnight, the stragglers began to head out. Emily was the first one to ask, "Where's Mark?" I said, "He's probably left. His car is still here." His car was parked exactly where it had been, under the oak near the curb. His jacket was still hanging over one of my dining chairs. His keys were still in the key box I put out for guests. His phone was on the kitchen island, buzzing every few minutes with messages from the same group chat we were all in. That was when everyone sobered up. We searched the yard with our phone flashlights. We checked everywhere, even the stupid places you check when you know a grown man can't fit, but you check anyway. Someone suggested he got picked up. Someone else said maybe he walked off drunk. Eventually, someone called the police. They came, asked questions, looked around, and took notes. I told them he had gone outside for a beer and never came back. So the search focused outward. By the time everyone left, it was almost 5 in the morning. I stood in the kitchen for a long time after the last car pulled away. The bonsai sat in the den where I left it. The soil seemed even darker now than when the beer had been spilled. I let it be and went to bed. I woke up this morning and I found something green growing out of my kitchen sink. At first I thought it was a piece of spinach. When I looked longer, I saw 3 little shoots coming up through the drain. Thin, pale stems with tiny green leaves at the ends. They leaned toward the window over the sink. I touched one with a fork. It bent away from the metal. I dropped the fork into the sink as I jumped backwards. That was when I remembered the card from the box. Do not allow root access beyond pot. I thought that meant the roots might make it harder to repot without damaging the plant. I grabbed the drain cleaner from under the sink, and I poured until the chemical smell burned my nose and the little green shoots disappeared under the liquid. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, all at once, pipes knocked all around me, and I thought the house would split in half. A violent and deep metallic banging from inside the wall behind the sink traveled under the floor, then somewhere toward the den. I stepped back as the drain hissed, and the whole counter trembled. Something below me made a low, shifting sound, like furniture being dragged across a room. From the den came a dry rustling of leaves, 1,000 tiny movements layered on top of one another, like the tree was shivering. As quickly as it had started, the house went quiet, and I stood there with the empty bottle in my hand. I thought I had fixed it. I poured boiling water down after it, hoping it would wash out the chemicals from my pipes. I went into the den and saw that the bonsai had outgrown its wire. The training wire I had wrapped so carefully around the trunk to shape it was embedded halfway into the bark. The trunk had thickened around it in minutes. The bark bulged around each turn like a ring around a swollen finger. The leaves looked wet, glossy, and full. New roots had spilled over the side of the pot and touched the floor. One of them had reached the vent again. A new one had stretched in the opposite direction toward the kitchen. I stood in the doorway and tasted metal. I hadn't poisoned it. I fed it. That was when I finally understood what should have been obvious from the beginning. I needed to kill it. I'd only been to the basement a handful of times for the breaker box, but I never took stock of the equipment in the far corner. The familiar smell I had become accustomed to was strong in the basement. As I scanned my flashlight across the room, I did not see any roots or branches. I searched the pile. Just a weed whacker, garden shears, shovel, and a machete. I bent over and took the machete. As I stood up, my eyes caught a thin strand hanging off the ceiling beam. It was one of the innumerable roots that had slithered across the support beams. As I ran my flashlight across the ceiling, I saw that they also followed the pipes, vents, and electrical lines. The entire house had become a trellis for this thing. In the far corner, I noticed 2 thicker root tips hanging limply, different than the rest. When I took a step toward them, I realized they were shoe laces. A shoe hanging from the ceiling by vines. Another step forward, and that shoe was attached to a leg. As I came closer, I was able to see Mark held in the air by roots. Some roots simply supported him. Others were growing shallow into his skin, still visible like tortuous veins. Large roots weaved through the wall of his chest. His eyes were held open by small tendrils hooked in the corners of his eyelids. 2 thicker roots disappeared into his mouth. Smaller roots followed their path and threaded between his teeth and down his throat. I hoped he was already dead. Then his eyes were pulled towards me and his lips began to move silently under the control of the roots. The roots around his chest tightened, forcing air out of him one word at a time in a raspy, muffled tone.
He's almost ready.
I swung my machete, trying to cut what was left of Mark's body down, but they recoiled in response, pulling Mark tightly to the ceiling. As they squeezed him tight, a sound of anger came from his body. A thick limb swept the floor and knocked me to the ground. Roots reached down from the ceiling and grabbed my arm to pull me closer to Mark. I used my weapon to free myself. Every cut root leaked the metallic-smelling sap. Some of it fell on my face. It burned. The basement lights flickered and the HVAC began to roar. I needed to get upstairs, and I needed to wash off the sap before it burned too deeply into my skin. The roots chased me into the den. The trunk was twisting and thickening before my eyes. Its branches writhed as the exposed roots spilled over the pot and shot across the floor. Offshoots went into the air vents and covered the doors and windows. The tree itself was still quite small, with its exposed roots now beet red. I ran to the front door, grabbed the knob, and twisted. Nothing. The knob would not turn. I looked down and saw the thin red roots threading through the edge of the door frame. They had grown into the seams. I saw them flex and relax under the paint, like a vein under the skin. I tried to pull harder. The door may have shifted half an inch, just enough for the roots to tighten back the gap. I ran desperately to the back door. Same thing. The kitchen window was my next best bet. I had it open about 2 inches when roots shot out, grabbed it, and slammed it shut with enough force to crack the glass. Then red roots spread across the pane, weaving through the broken glass until there was no opening left. I stopped for a moment, helpless, waiting for the roots to take hold, but nothing. Then there was tapping. One inside the kitchen wall, one beneath the floor in the den, 2 or 3 above me in the ceiling. Back and forth. The taps never seemed to happen at the same time, like they were waiting for the other to finish. Were they communicating or testing something? Maybe they were mapping the house, learning the exits, and closing them. I thought about the pot in the den, the stone with the roots displayed exactly how I wanted them. I thought about how I'd carefully shaped my tree. It was beauty through restraint. I failed to keep the tree contained. It found a bigger pot, and I was in it. Then the walls creaked, the floor under me gave a pop, and in the den, the leaves began to rustle. So, now I'm in my home office. I don't know if I want to slash my way through the window or try my luck at destroying the part of this thing still in the pot. I don't know if that would do any more than anger it, but I think it might be worth a shot. I can still hear the branches and the leaves rustling when I hear the occasional tapping and creaking. Small roots are sweeping their way under the door now, feeling around, exploring the new space. I'm not waiting for them to find me. I'm going to make a run for it and destroy whatever is still in that pot. If you see this post, do not order seeds from any site claiming to have accelerated stock. And if a box arrives without a postmark, do not open it. Do not give it soil. Do not give it water. Do not give it a pot. Do not give it a home.